Yeah, I think there was a little bit. I told you all 5:30. Yeah. And I tried to crowd 5:15. We'll start at like closer to 5:30. There's no rush.
Perfect. And the next group comes to 6:15.
It's a quick.
Perfect. Well, thanks for doing this.
Hi, so much yesterday. It was Kellie Warren.
How did canvassing go Saturday? With granddaughter. Oh my gosh. Does she just love doing that?
She does.
Yeah.
All right. She was so excited to do it for Aunt Joella. So that was a good practice because
Yes. Right.
She remembered it from a couple years ago.
She did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so fun.
It really is
I
fun.
love Joella.
Yes,
she's great.
Knocking under us to see amicable enough that we can all
We can still do
take
it.
your granddaughter.
Right?
You know?
I agree. I totally agree. And steal your chair. Oh boy. Nice. Do you need anything? Okay.
We're getting ready to finish up the second round.
I got it from this one. Do you videotaping this?
Yes.
Oh, do they allow you to?
Yeah. We're all welcome to if we like. I'm glad I did. There's been at least one of these where their camera's messed up and they lost their recording. And I was able to help out.
That's right, that's right. Then you're right. It is, yeah.
I changed our mics to 10 out of 10. Yeah. This makes me really happy. We have a mic on a spreadsheet. This part does not wind up.
Oh, we all are.
Yeah, but I pretty much.
I love your.
Oh, it's right.
grandmother.
My experience? Okay, thank you.
Well, Cindy, Tabitha.
Oh, okay.
Like mine.
She's thinking things in your mind. That's good. Yeah. Absolutely.
So he goes that long.
Yes, you're on my phone. Yes, I just have to.
Oh, he's basketball, you see, and I know.
Oh, Monday, Tuesday, Monday. I've got my, yeah, Monday I've got my board meeting. Yes, Monday. Yeah. Tuesday. Tuesday's
Like, did on the tripod more than once.
No, it's
Kind of I wanted him at the center, but
I mean, you're out of town or something.
that's just that you're not left the center.
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
So, you sit down, and it doesn't matter. Can you unmute number 5?
Unmute.
Click that button so you should be able to hear me. Do you see sound levels on the computer?
Yeah.
Bouncing up and down, check, check, check. Is it good, like in the middle?
To the middle.
Okay, that's good. You can hear me now.
Just double check and make sure that.
Really hard to choose. Too hard.
I know the code. You can't change it.
Yeah. But it was August 24th.
Korean had it picked up. They always say, what?
I got the wrong sister. It walks out. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There are. They only have like.
I had no idea.
Oh no.
Well, what about, what about me? Thank you. Very much.
I should have broken my arm. Not like that. I wouldn't think I would have
Right, you
broken
did
my
that.
neck. Yeah.
Oh, good, okay, yeah.
I just did it.
Oh, no, you did that, okay, good, yeah, Saturday. Yeah, Saturday, yeah. Oh, so you did it Saturday. How'd that go? Yeah, I had that too. I didn't know that you were, honestly. Yeah.
Well, I
Oh, yeah, sorry.
For the candidates who are here, if you can make your way to the table, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I've been watching you on your, yeah, so nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for hosting. Appreciate it.
She's gonna be here, so always a spot for her if she comes in. One thing we did to go first. Thanks. So, you guys select travel. Just for opening today. That will rotate for everyone. Hand it back.
Oh, I guess I can.
Karen will go first, and then we'll go to Kellie. Like I said, it's almost 5:30.
Yeah, I talked to her, she said she was going to start here to try.
Yeah, so we'll you have.
Just to let you know, I'll be drinking my but as I'm floating around
One of our staff members.
Oh, okay.
I'll go grab a chair and sit next to you. Okay.
You'll be able to hear yourself too.
They're not gonna blast all across the library, are they?
Well, it'll be kind of contained in this area, but this is the community.
All right, we do have our final candidate for this forum. I see her walking across the street, so we'll give her one more minute and then we will get started.
Squeeze right in here.
Sure.
If you don't mind, do you, Bill?
Yeah, you're fine.
You already got a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Correct. So, Haley is, she's going to alternate the camera views. So when Kyle is talking, his camera will be on, and that's what we'll hear on the live stream camera. We'll have your mic muted in between as well, I believe. Is that what we decided, Kyle? Their mics will be muted when they're not talking.
To limit feedback.
Yeah.
So here's my phone.
Right, so you're not in control of turning them back on, that is what the sound will do. It was about my
And then red is next, you know.
All right, good evening and welcome to this candidate forum hosted by the Johnson County Post featuring candidates vying for 3 Kansas Senate seats in Johnson County. We'll give them a chance to introduce themselves shortly, but first, my name is Kyle Palmer. I'm the editor of the Johnson County Post, and I'm honored to be the moderator for this forum and the 2 that will follow. We do consider events like this our bread and butter. We have hosted such forums nearly every year since the Post founding nearly 15 years ago. They allow our readers and residents of Johnson County direct access to the people who hold elected office and govern your communities. And the Post prides itself on giving you fact-based, informative coverage of your local communities that you can't find anywhere else. And local elections, we feel, are a perfect time to demonstrate that service to Johnson County. So if you are a subscriber to the Post, I want to thank you. It's your support that allows us to put on events like this. We would not be able to do our annual election coverage without your ongoing support. And most of our revenue indeed comes from the more than 7,500 paying subscribers. If you do not currently subscribe but are watching this or are in the room and are curious, you can go to johnsoncountypost.com and check us out and see if you like us and stick around. A big thanks to Johnson County Library, who's co-sponsoring this event tonight, as well as the other ones we're hosting this election season. We're at Lenexa City Center Library in Lenexa. It's a beautiful space. We've done forums here before. Johnson County Library this fall is helping us put on 8 nights of forums between now and when early voting starts on October 19th. And we want to thank the folks at the library for all their help and support during election season. We're also live streaming this event tonight on the Post Facebook page, as we plan to do with the other forums tonight and for the rest of this month. This forum in its entirety will be archived at our Facebook page so that voters can watch it at any point as they prepare to cast their vote up to and on November 5th. And of course, I also want to thank the candidates for being here tonight. Running for office is time-consuming, labor-intensive. You have a lot of commitments this time of year, but you are seeking a position that will directly impact our readers, and we do appreciate you giving some of your time to help voters understand your positions on the issues affecting this race. Well, I'll explain the format briefly. So they'll each get an opening statement. We've drawn Scrabble tiles, so we know that Karen Thurlow will go first, but they'll each get a chance to introduce themselves. Then all the candidates will get a series of questions after that, some from me, some posed by you in the audience. If you have an index card on your seat and you'd like to write down a question that you want to be asked of all the candidates, you can do that right now. I will say, in past forums, as we've gotten through the forums, and the candidates have started to answer questions, some people feverishly write down questions as a follow-up to then hand to me and say, like, ask this person this thing. We're not really going to have time to do that. We do want questions directed to all candidates, and once we get through an issue, we're not really going to have a chance to go back. So if you have a burning issue or a question, write it down now and give it to Leah in the audience. After that, again, we have 2 more forums after this. We may have a chance for closing statements, but we also might just end on a question. And I'll let the candidates know how much time you have for each response, and you'll all get the same amount of time to respond. I would also say that if there is a opportunity or a chance for rebuttal, if you mention your opponent by name or another candidate up here by name, I might give that candidate 30 seconds to respond, but again, we want to get through as many questions as possible. Well, with that being said, let's dive right into opening statements. And again, the luck of the draw went to Karen Thurlow in the Senate District 11 race. Again, from left to right, you have 4 candidates up here representing 3 different Senate districts, and they'll get to introduce themselves. But on the right table is Senate District 11, and so 1 minute for Karen Thurlow to introduce herself to the voters.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you to everybody at the Johnson County Post for hosting this forum tonight, and thank you to the other candidates that are here with me. I'm honored to be in your company. I'm Karen Thurlow, and I am running for the Kansas Senate in Senate District 11, and I am honored to be endorsed by our Governor, Laura Kelly. I am an attorney. I have lived and worked in our Johnson County community for over 31 years, and I am the mom of 2 grown kids who had the privilege of attending our excellent Blue Valley schools. My daughter has gone on to be a physician, and my son is a licensed mental health counselor. And I think that this forum is a really important event tonight, and I appreciate everybody who came out and everybody who's tuned in, because I think it offers a good opportunity to voters to see the candidates and hear their positions and see side by side what and who is on the ballot in November.
Thank you to Karen Thurlow. We're mindful of feedback in the room, so Kaylee right here will be muting and unmuting microphones, and so if you have a little bit of a clip before you start and don't hear yourself, just give it a couple of seconds, and Kaylee will make sure to turn the microphones on. We'll stay in District 11 and now give Kellie Warren a chance to introduce herself.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Kyle, and thank you to the Johnson County Post and the Lenexa City Center Johnson County Library for hosting the event, and for all of you attending tonight and all of you who will be watching online later. I'm Kellie Warren, and I'm honored to represent and be the voice of those who live in Senate District 11. I grew up in Johnson County, and my husband and I both graduated Shawnee Mission South High School, and now I'm the proud mom of 4 Blue Valley kids. And I think whether you're new to the area, you've lived here a long time, or you grew up here like me, you chose here for the quality of life we have in Johnson County. So while serving in the legislature, I work with both parties, I listen to constituents, and I focus on policies that will maintain and improve the quality of life we have here so that you can lead the best life possible that you choose. So while serving in the legislature, that means I focused on getting results that lower the cost of living, whether that's lowering property tax, providing property tax relief, eliminating the Social Security income tax, and fully funding our schools, and as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, working on public safety. And these will continue to be my priorities if I'm reelected to a second term.
Coming back to the left side of the table now, and to Senate District 6, will allow Sitting Senator Pettey to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone.
You're good.
Make an impression right off the bat. I want to thank the Johnson County Post and the library for hosting us tonight. I think this is a great example of the use of our public libraries and how important it is for our communities, to fund them, and the legislature actually has done that as well. I was a strong supporter of that, so thank you to the library. I'm a lifelong Kansan, a mother, a grandmother, to 5, and I'm a homeowner and a taxpayer. I taught in our public schools for 36 years, and during my time in the Senate, I've worked to protect the funding of our public schools, reduce the tax burdens on working Kansans, and improve the quality of life. I stood up for delivering on the shared values of our communities. I've been endorsed by Governor Kellie, and I'm very proud of that because our governor has done an excellent job in her term now, in her second term. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to talking about other issues.
And for the final opening statement, we'll now move to Senate District 8 and give Cindy Holscher a chance to introduce herself. Cindy.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Kyle, as well as the library for hosting us. I'm Senator Cindy Holscher from Senate District 8, which covers a large part of the Overland Park area. I ran for the legislature first in 2016 at the height of the Brownback experiment, which was having a devastating effect on our state. Once elected, during my first session, I was a co-founder of the Women's Bipartisan Caucus, which helped bring an end to that experiment, which brought us back to revenue sustainability and then allowed us to go ahead and fully fund our schools. So it's been a long road back, but we've reached financial stability and, like I said, fulfilling our obligations. My professional background is in marketing and operations for Sprint Publishing, where on a daily basis I collaborate with various teams, develop product solutions and innovative solutions, as well as create and maintain multi-million-dollar budgets for the company. Those skills have come in very handy in the legislature, where we have to work to collaborate and find solutions. So happy to be a part of the team in the legislature working for the good people of Kansas.
Thank you for the opening statements. Now let's dive into some questions, and we've been starting in State House forums with a question that allows you maybe to extend a little bit on your opening statement and talk more about some issues that you care about, as well as the issues you think are priorities for your constituents. So the question is, and we'll fall to Kellie Warren first, and each of you will get 90 seconds to respond to this. We're holding forums for dozens of State House districts. What do you see as the biggest priority or needs from residents in your district, in this case District 11? And we'll start with Kellie Warren.
Thank you, Kyle, and as the senator who represents Senate District 11, I've been listening to constituents. I've been listening while I have conversation at doorsteps and listening while I've been serving as their voice in Topeka. And the number one thing I hear about is property taxes. Property taxes are high, and it's pricing people right out of their homes. So we provided some property tax relief, which I'm proud to say was a bipartisan effort, and we also, to help with folks' wallets and the high inflation that we have, we also eliminated the state income tax on Social Security. So proud of that bipartisan effort as well. Also, fully funded the schools without raising your taxes, and we have to ensure that our schools stay fully funded, because education is a huge priority for Senate District 11, as it is for me. Like I said, I'm a mom of 4 Blue Valley kids and want to make sure that all kids in Johnson County and across our state have the best opportunity to build a great foundation with a great education. And then I would also say public safety. I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee, and that means I focus on fighting crime and law and order. I work closely with our sheriffs, our police officers, our prosecutors, give them the tools and resources they need to keep our families and our neighborhoods safe. That means fighting the fentanyl crisis. That means fighting human trafficking, fighting human smuggling. We banned sanctuary cities in Kansas. We see crime, especially here in Johnson County. Senate District 11 borders another state. We've got to make sure we maintain a good, safe quality of life we have here.
Same question now to Pat Pettey in Senate District 6. What do you see as the biggest priority or needs for residents in the district? And I will say most of it's in Wyandotte County, but you do have a small square that covers parts of Miriam, Mission, and Overland Park, so that's what we're talking about here. So Senator Pettey, what do you see as the biggest priority for that?
Well, I don't think it's whether I'm talking about Wyandotte County or whether I'm talking about Johnson County. The issues are very much the same. Reducing residential property taxes is a major issue whenever I actually do meet a resident at their door. Often they're not there. But that is a major issue. Fully funding our public schools, though, is also so important, because without quality education, no matter where you live in the state of Kansas, whether you live in Wyandotte County or whether you live in Johnson County, we're not going to be moving forward as a state. We're not going to have our children ready to meet the needs of the employers, and it continues to be the best tool for economic growth. And for me, that's so important, because often we'll hear that our public schools are not being successful in some parts of the state, and I hear that from Wyandotte County. But I also know that the population that's in my county, Wyandotte County, as opposed to Johnson County, is not always the same. And so public education is there for all, to help all move forward. Protecting reproductive rights is also very important. We voted in 2022 to do just that, and over 70% of Kansas said yes, that was the number one thing, and they continue to say that today. Increasing access to quality child care has been an issue that I have continued to work for, and when I started the Early Childhood Caucus, I've done that to help provide more information to legislators so they understand why early childhood education is so important.
Same question out to Senate District 8 and Cindy Holscher, the biggest priority or needs that you see in District 8.
Yes, thank you. The biggest priorities, Senate District 8 as well as other parts of the state, seem to be a common theme in terms of public schools, taxes, and access to health care. The biggest thing about Johnson County, as well as beyond the borders of our county, is the fact that we have a great economy, a great lifestyle, and it's anchored to our public schools. I've often told people we don't have beaches or oceans to bring people here. It's our schools that do it for us. And people in Johnson County, as well as across the state, recognize that we have excellent schools, that we need to maintain them, and that is basically our bread and butter. In terms of healthcare, what I'm hearing at the doors, people in Kansas are kind of frustrated that we haven't been able to get Medicaid expansion as well as medicinal cannabis, things that are very much supported by the general public. However, the people who control the legislature, the extremists who are in leadership positions, just won't let those topics move forward. So I understand that frustration, and I share that. As someone who has supported Medicaid expansion from day one of entering the legislature, it is still a priority for this state, and we should every session be working to make it manifest in Kansas. The additional area too that people are bringing up is in regard to access to reproductive health care. In August of 2022, Kansans overwhelmingly stated that they are in favor of access to abortion. However, in the months right after that vote, there were 21 bills brought forward to erode access. That is another frustration point to Kansans. And in terms of taxes, we brought forward some tax relief, but we still have some more work to do there.
And rounding out this question back in District 11, we heard from Kellie Warren earlier, so now let's hear from Karen Thurlow, the biggest priority or need you see in this district that you seek to represent.
Thank you. Yes, I would echo what the senators up here have said, that property tax relief is top of mind, and I believe there is more work to be done in that area. When I'm out door knocking, though, the resounding theme I hear is our public schools. And they need to be fully and adequately funded. The school funding formula expires at the end of this year and will be rewritten in the next legislative session. And there is a movement afoot to bring vouchers to our state. And voucher schemes threaten funding for sports, they threaten funding for activities, and they divert funds away from our neighborhood public schools. And those diverted funds go into a black hole with no taxpayer oversight. And as Senator Holscher aptly noted, our home values and our local economy benefit tremendously from having high-performing schools. And as a product of public schools, as a child of public educators, I will fight for our public schools. The other thing I hear at doors is concerns about continuing access to reproductive rights as well as to IVF and to contraception. They are under attack in this state. And even after the vote in August of 2022, make no mistake about it, reproductive rights, right to birth control, access to IVF are all on the ballot. People think this issue is settled. It's not settled. Again, as Senator Holscher pointed out, there have been more than 20 bills brought forward seeking to chip away at our abortion rights, and I will fight for those.
We'll get to some other questions. I will just note 3 Senate districts represented up here. I will say in Senate District 6, the other candidate, Republican Tabitha Burt, was not going to be here tonight. She said she was busy knocking doors in the district. And then Senate District 8, Cindy Holscher's opponent is Republican Benee Hudson. She did have a long-planned family event. And this time of year, it really is hard to get 4, 5, 6 candidates in the room at once. And so we do appreciate the candidates who are here, but also note that there are 2 candidates who did at least explain their conflicts. Let's go to the first question, or the next question, to Pat Pettey in District 6. And all of you mentioned taxes in your questions about priorities. We do have a question from the audience already. In what circumstances is a tax increase appropriate at the state level? So that's one person's framing of the issue. But of course, we do know the big tax cut bill that was passed this summer slashes roughly $2.4 billion in property and income taxes. A couple of you specifically mentioned property taxes and the burden that has on local residents. So the question for all of you, 60 seconds to respond. Are there any other tax cuts or tax relief policies you'd like to see the legislature pursue next year? In the words of this question, is there any circumstance where you raise taxes? Is that appropriate at the state level? So 60 seconds, we'll start with Pat Pettey in District 6.
Thank you. I think it's important to remember that there were a number of tax bills last year, and because of the really good leadership of our governor, who wanted to make sure that we were being fiscally wise in the decisions that were made, we had to go into special session. And so I very much support what we passed in the special session. But we do have a strong ending balance, and I do think there are a few places where we can make some changes. One of them is that raising the level when the tax will begin in place from $75,000 to $125,000. That will help all homeowners. As also, we did pass renewing the tax on, or taking away the tax on Social Security, which benefits anyone who's on Social Security, because there is no income limit on that, as well as doubling the child care tax credit. So those are areas that have helped all families. But I would mention the increasing to $125,000 as well, and so I'll follow up with some more later.
We'll go to Senate District 8 and Cindy Holscher. The question to you: any other tax cuts, tax relief policies you'd like to see the legislature pursue next year? Anything that can be done about local property taxes? We have a question here. Do you support the recent property tax increase passed by the Johnson County Commission? As well as the questioner before, in what circumstances might be it appropriate to increase taxes at the state level? So all these questions about taxes, what's your approach and philosophy?
We have a surplus right now. So to me, of utmost importance is making sure that we are returning money to the taxpayers and making sure that it's working class Kansans. I want to bring your attention to the fact that there are some postcards, I think, that have been going out saying that certain Democrats voted against tax relief for working class Kansans. Some of them say four times that a person voted against tax relief. Keep in mind, those first plans that were brought forward were primarily targeted to relief for upper income Kansans. There was a group of us that held out throughout session, which normally runs from January to May, who said we want the child care tax credit. We also want the tax exemption for Social Security. And we had to wait and didn't get it until June in special session. So please know, like I said, there was a lot of work going on to make sure that there was tax relief for, like I said, working class Kansans. I do think there's some areas we can look at in the near future. Freeze on property tax increases, evaluating possible changes to the appeals process. I think all those could have an impact on everyday Kansans.
Going to the District 11 race, we'll start with Karen Thurlow. Your approach to taxes, any other tax cuts or tax relief policies you'd like to pursue if elected? In particular, anything that the state can do about local property taxes?
So I support further tax relief. As Senator Holscher noted, we do have a surplus, and I'm in favor of returning that money to the taxpayers, but it has to be done in a responsible manner. Because as I look around this room, I'm sure that many of us remember the failed brown bag tax experiment, and we simply must not go back to those days. I was in favor of the tax plan, the tax relief plan that was passed this summer. I do think that, as Senator Pettey noted, it would be appropriate to raise the exemption for property taxes to give people much needed relief. I also think an interesting concept to think about would be a sales tax holiday, perhaps, to help families getting kiddos back to school. And another place, though, where I think we have to be careful with, you know, what we're doing with tax money is, again, back to the issue of vouchers. Those are a tax credit for people, and that is just something we cannot afford.
Staying to District 11, Kellie Warren, the question to you, any more tax cuts, tax relief policies you'd like to pursue if reelected? Anything the state can do regarding property taxes?
I've listened to constituents at thousands and thousands of doors and conversations, and I hear it time and time again. Enough with the taxes. Taxes are far too high in Kansas. We're the 8th or 9th highest taxing state in the country. So I would not support any raising of taxes, and I'm proud to say that Kansas has had a balanced budget while I've been serving without raising taxes. And rather than a surplus, why tax Kansans at a high rate in the first place? That's your hard-earned dollars. You should get to keep it, not just have it returned to you, but keep it in the first place. I think the question was, do I support the recent property tax increase by Johnson County Commissioners? No, I don't. That's the number one tax I hear about is high property taxes. So what I will do in my second term is I would focus on making property tax reform a priority. Whether it's make assessments more fair, make the comps more fair, more accountable process, and maybe cap the amount that the local governments can increase your percentage of property taxes, and maybe establish the county assessor as an elected position to be directly accountable to you, the voter and the taxpayer.
Another issue you mentioned frequently in the very first question was education, so we're going to jump to a new issue, and I'll start with Cindy Holscher in District 8. I think a couple of you mentioned it already. Governor Laura Kelly has boasted of 6 consecutive years of K-12 education in Kansas being, in her words, fully funded. And of course, the funding bill passed this year also boosts funding for special education, not quite up to the level that the state board recommended, but still boosted it. The funding situation appears to be remedied enough that the Kansas Supreme Court is no longer overseeing the funding process. So what do you see as the biggest priorities or remaining challenges for K-12 school funding, and how would you want to address that if elected, or in your case, Cindy Holscher, re-elected? So I'll give you 60 seconds to start this question off.
Well, yeah, the biggest challenge, or maybe the biggest concern, is ensuring that we have public school supporters in the legislature, because as you indicated, the Supreme Court is no longer overseeing this. And I will tell you, every session has been a battle to ensure our schools are funded, because there is a very real large faction in the legislature that wants to defund our schools. And again, every year it's a battle just to ensure that we get basic funding for K through 12. And what's going to happen is, again, without this oversight, the upcoming legislators will make the determination regarding what fully funded means. Keep in mind, some legislators feel that the rate of 50% of what we're currently doing could qualify as fully funding. That's concerning. We have come so close over the past few years to losing our schools, again, because of this faction that is fighting against us to ensure that we are funding. This election will be critical in ensuring that great decisions are made to keep us going as that center of education that we have become known as.
Going to District 11, Karen Thurlow, the question to you about education. What do you see as the biggest priorities or remaining challenges for K-12 education funding going into 2025?
Thank you, and I would echo what Senator Holscher said. I think school funding has been an ongoing battle that has been subject to oversight by the Supreme Court. That's how much trouble we've had keeping our schools at the level of excellence that we have, and it's an ongoing battle, as has been noted. And I want to be one of the people that Senator Holscher referenced in terms of a supporter of public schools. I'm the daughter of public educators. My dad was a college professor. My mom taught 5th grade in my hometown. I went to public schools, my kids went to public schools, and I will fight for our schools. I think one of the challenges in the next legislative session, looking down the road, is to make sure that we do not allow the concept of vouchers into the equation, because those will divert money away and have a devastating effect on our school district. And like has been mentioned a number of times, you know, the level of excellence of our schools is tied to many other things. Not only do we want our kids well educated, but we want our communities to be attractive and our home values to remain where they are.
Staying in District 11, Kellie Warren, the question about education. What do you see as the biggest remaining challenges or priorities for K-12 education funding going into 2025?
Thank you. Our governor has said that the schools have been fully funded for the 6 years she has served as governor. Fully funded for the 6 years she has served. The Kansas Supreme Court agrees and has dismissed the lawsuit regarding school finance. I'm proud to have taken the vote yes to fully fund our schools, to get those results, to get the Supreme Court to say yes, the schools are fully funded. The governor has said yes, the schools are fully funded. So I'm not sure what the spin is about the ongoing battle, but both the governor and the Kansas Supreme Court agree our schools have been fully funded. I've lived my life in public education. I'm a K through 12 Shawnee Mission grad. I have 4 kids in the Blue Valley schools, so I know the schools from the inside. I serve on the PTO boards at the elementary and high school. So I know how important schools are to our community, and I know it's the gemstone of Kansas and especially Johnson County. So I support our schools, and you can rest assured that I will work to make sure they stay fully funded without having to raise taxes.
Going over to Pat Pettey in District 6, rounding out this question about education, what do you see as the biggest priorities, remaining challenges for K-12 education funding next year?
Well, I'm endorsed by KNEA, AFT, and Game On, and the fact that the legislature will be rewriting the school finance law that has worked well means that we need to have strong public supporters, educator supporters at the table. Many people will say, oh, the finance formula is complicated. It is complex, and it should be complex because there are many facets to how schools are funded and where those, it makes sense to have pockets going different ways. I think not every district has the same property tax resources. That's why we have, within that formula, we have a dedicated amount of money that's going towards public education. I want to see that remain in that. I've heard some legislators say, hey, we should get rid of the at-risk funding because that's only targeted to certain students. Believe me, I represent districts that have large numbers of at-risk students, and that helps them to reach those goals to strong public education. So we need to have strong supporters who understand the formula and are willing to make sure that it stays in place and works for all Kansans.
The next issue, again mentioned by at least a couple of you in that first question, is about abortion. And we have a couple of questions from the audience that kind of get to the kind of, I think, competing values and positions and thoughts about this hot button issue, both in the audience and among readers and Kansans in general. But we'll start with Karen Thurlow in District 11 for this question, just to give you a flavor of where the audience is at. One person writes, pointing out 72% of Senate 11 voted for vote no. That would have been 2 years ago for the Value Them Both campaign. Would you propose legislation that continues to chip away at reproductive rights? That's just one questioner. Now the questioner asks, do you support a woman's right to be born and survive her own birth, suggesting there is sanctity to unborn life? So you can see differing views about this. So what are your thoughts? Do you support any new restrictions on abortion or any laws in any way governing the procedure? A couple of you have mentioned that such measures have been debated in the last couple of years since that 2022 vote. So where's your stance? Karen Thurlow.
Well, I certainly do not support any further restrictions, and I will say, you know, the job that I am running for and applying for here is to be a representative and to listen to the folks in Senate District 11 and to represent those folks. And as was noted, this Senate district voted 72% no on the Value Them Both initiative. And that initiative came out of the Judiciary Committee that was chaired by my esteemed colleague to my left. And that tells, you know, I appreciate that was her job. She, you know, wanted to bring that issue to the fore, but people spoke. They indicated what their will. The majority, the vast majority of Senate 11 and this state said no to government overreach, to intrusion into their personal lives. These are difficult decisions, and they are certainly not decisions that the government should be making.
And the order falls to you, Kellie Warren, so maybe give you a chance maybe to respond directly to what was Second Karen Thurlow's response, as well as to answer the question, do you support looking at any new laws that might impact or restrict the abortion procedures going forward?
Thank you, Kyle. And the Value Them Both did come through the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we wanted to give voters a chance to decide the issue for themselves. So the voters spoke on this issue 2 years ago. It's an issue that's been decided. I respect that decision, and I tell you what, As a mom of 4 kids, including 3 daughters, and I remember when I first held them as newborns, and I wouldn't choose to miss that moment, and I know that we all have different views on the issue, and I think we can, however, work together on issues like whether taxpayers fund abortion or whether there are late-term abortions in Kansas. But the courts are clearly in charge of the issue, not the legislature, and I think the legislature knows that, and I think voters realize that it's an issue that's been decided 2 years ago. The challenges facing voters today are what we've been talking about here. Taxes, making sure our schools are fully funded, and making sure we have public safety. So I don't think voters are interested in relitigating the past, but moving on to issues that face them today.
And just because both of you are here, so it is a divide, I think, a clear split between you that I think can illustrate to voters their choices. I'm going to ask both of you follow-up questions before we get back to Pat and Cindy. So for Carrie, we do have, as kind of indicated by at least one of the questions we got from the audience, there are a lot of readers, a substantial portion of readers we get comments from who do see sanctity in unborn life. Do you think the current regime in Kansas does protect unborn life, and responding to that segment of voters and constituents who do believe that?
You know, what I think is that it is immoral to expect a woman to have no say over what she can do with her body. And it is immoral to make a woman carry a pregnancy to term if that is not what she wants to do, and to force her to do that without the benefit of health insurance, without prenatal care, to have that baby in a hospital and be medically bankrupt when the hospital bill comes due, when there is no paid maternal leave, when there is no infrastructure or support for childcare, when there are people that do not want to support our public schools. So if we're going to talk about sanctity of life and morality, we need to be addressing that whole gamut of issues.
And the follow-up question to Kellie Warren on this issue before we move back to Pat and Cindy. For some readers, this is a matter of trusting women, their doctors, to make personal private decisions. They see some moves to continue to, in the words of at least one questioner, chip away at abortion laws that maybe require abortion providers to give surveys to women, asking them why they're getting an abortion, funding for pregnancy resource centers. These types of measures they see either as invasive or at least against the spirit of the 2022 vote. So how do you respond to that?
Thank you, Kyle. And again, voters have spoken on this issue. It's largely left up to the courts, not the legislature. So there's no chipping away at any rights. And pregnancy resource centers, if a woman chooses to be having the baby, then we want women supported, whatever their choice is. So that was a pregnancy resource center bill to support those women who make that choice. We also had a bill that would protect a woman from being bullied into having an abortion. And also a bill that if a baby was accidentally born alive during an abortion procedure, would be provided medical attention. So there's no chipping away at the rights. So that's just spin, and that's not possible in Kansas. The Kansas Supreme Court has spoken. Any legislation would be subject to strict scrutiny in Kansas, and that is a very high bar that is not going to be passed. So there's going to be no chipping away regardless of what your personal thoughts are on the issue. So it has been decided by the Supreme Court and by you, the voters in Kansas. And most people say to me, isn't that an issue that's been decided? I mean, I've got high taxes, I've got high grocery bills, I've got high gas to pay as well. So in the thousands of doors I've been knocking on and listening to, those are the issues I've been hearing about.
All right, Pettey, in Senate District 6, this question to you. Both you and Cindy, your opponents aren't here, so give you a chance to respond to this. Any new restrictions, new laws on abortion, any new laws impacting the procedure whatsoever? Do you support that? What is your stance on this issue?
So I am endorsed by Great Plains Planned Parenthood, and in 2021, I went door to door to encourage voters to vote no, and I don't want to see my granddaughter or any woman to grow up with less rights than I gained. Over 24 pieces of legislation were brought up in 2024, and we talk about there are no late-term abortions in Kansas, and most of them occur through the morning after pill. The pieces of legislation are intrusive onto women's rights. The survey, additional questions, what's your educational level? Why would a woman that's has gone through much stress to decide with her family whether she's going to move forward on abortion, should have to answer any other questions like that. So those kinds of things are what, those pieces of legislation are what are being brought up. Abortion is a safe procedure that's highly regulated already. So anytime you hear something about, well, we're only doing it for the safety of the woman, it's already a safe procedure.
And then finally, you got me. All right. Okay, Kellie, you pushing a lot of buttons. Senate District 8, Cindy Holscher, wrap up this issue about abortion. Your stance, any new laws, restrictions, however you want to frame it, that you would support, and/or how do you approach this if, in your case, reelected?
Certainly. We already have some of the toughest restrictions in Kansas, undoubtedly. So, you know, again, we had this amendment in 2022. Kansans overwhelmingly rejected it. Yet, the legislature refuses to listen to the will of the people and continues to bring forward bills to erode access. Because the heart of the matter is the anti-abortion movement that, again, pushed value them both, didn't get the answer they wanted. So they keep coming back at it from different angles. And here's something you need to keep in mind. Every Republican in the House and the Senate voted for this bill, for this amendment, with no exceptions for rape, incest, or life of the mother. No exceptions whatsoever. It was brought forward to be added and to change, but that was rejected. So that is the amendment that we got on the ballot, that we all voted, that went down essentially in Kansas. But apparently, like I said, that movement is not happy with that decision that was made by the voters of Kansas. It is imperative that our voters make the connection between what is being done at the state level and the abortion issue. And again, as somebody said, abortion is on the ballot this year with the election of state legislators.
Well, we have a number of questions from the audience, and I think the order falls to Kellie Warren to start this one off. 60 seconds for all of you on this. And kind of an entree into another issue that we do get a lot of questions about, and that is guns, gun safety, gun control, however you want to frame it. But this person from the audience asks, can't fact check on the fly here, so I'll take them at their word. In 2021, the legislature overrode the governor's veto of a bill that now allows 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons onto college campuses. So this is kind of an entree into this particular issue, but also maybe your larger views on guns. Do you or don't you agree with allowing 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons onto campuses? So maybe that specific issue, but also if you want to use that as a jumping off point to describe more of your philosophy and thoughts about guns. Kellie Warren.
Thank you, Kyle. I support the Second Amendment, and you know, in Senate District 11 over the years, more and more people I know have guns, and because they fear for their safety. We've got a crime issue because of policies on the other side of state line. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the entire eastern border of Senate District 11 is state line, and we see defunding the police efforts on the other side of the state line. We have a border where we have fentanyl coming in, and we have those who are selling it, distributing it in our district. And so the real issue is crime, and what are we going to be doing to be tougher on crime? And so we need tougher laws on dangerous criminals who have been convicted felons and continue to use or possess weapons and firearms, which is illegal. So that's what I've been focusing on, working with our prosecutors, our sheriffs, and our police officers to make sure that those who feel the need to protect themselves, because we've got rampant crime on the other side of state line now trickling over into Johnson County. I've been to HOA meetings. I've seen on the driveway folks testing the door handles on the parked cars in the driveway.
The follow-up just to the specific question from the reader or the audience member, do you or don't you agree with allowing 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons on college campuses?
I think we need to go after the criminals, not those who want to defend themselves. So you're 18 years old, and if you're a woman walking across a college campus and you feel unsafe, you should be able to defend yourself.
Pettey, the question to you, I guess, again, the specific question of allowing guns on the college campuses, conceal and carry, as well as maybe broader thoughts from you about guns, gun safety, gun control. Give you 60 seconds.
Well, I voted against allowing 18-year-olds to carry guns on campus. It ended up being one of the only ways we could keep guns not being in our elementary and high schools is for that piece of that amendment to move forward. So I didn't support it when this piece of legislation originally moved forward, and I don't support it now. It just is another thing saying we need proliferation of deadly weapons. And, you know, it's not being a supporter of the Second Amendment. My husband was a gun owner. We had guns in our home at the time that he used for hunting. But when I support safe storage laws, background checks, and red flag laws. They are not in conflict with the Second Amendment, but they are supportive of safety for our children and our families. I want you to think about the fact that, I mean, I was a teacher, I've been retired for a while, but now every child, when they go to school, what do they have to be faced with every month? A program on how to address being safe in school.
District 8, Cindy Holscher, again, a specific question from the audience. Do you or don't you agree with allowing 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons onto campus, but also if you wanted to use that as a jumping off point to talk about guns more broadly?
Yeah, I struggle with that provision in the respect that campuses didn't want that, students didn't want that. It apparently seems that the NRA was the only body that actually wanted that measure to go through. And voters will ask me a couple times a week, why can't we get common sense measures through the legislature? Safe storage or red flag laws. Those have been passed in over 25 other states. I'm sorry, 26 safe storage laws passed in other states. 21 other states have implemented red flag. And the fact of the matter is we can't get hearings on those bills in Kansas because 60% of our legislature is controlled by the NRA. I am happy to say that I am endorsed by Moms Demand Action in every town, the organizations that are working for common sense gun reform.
And the final question on this issue goes back to District 11 and Karen Thurlow. Again, the specific question, do you or don't you agree with allowing 18-year-olds to carry concealed weapons on campus? And then more broadly, if you want to talk about your position on guns.
I do not agree with allowing 18-year-olds whose brains are not completely yet developed to carry guns on college campuses. I think that's a terrible idea. And I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. However, I am also a proud Moms Demand endorsed candidate, and I believe that you can be a believer in the Second Amendment and also believe that common sense gun reform, you know, there's been a lot of talk about crime and safety. Well, you know what? Some of these common sense gun laws would actually, you know, help us achieve those goals. And I think that things like safe storage laws, red flag laws, these are not extreme measures. These are not extreme ideas. These are mainstream ideas that most people agree with and would like to see happen. And they would go a long way to keep our kids and our communities safe. And if elected, I would certainly support those measures.
We have a couple more questions from the audience, time for a couple more questions from the audience, and these are ones we've not got before, so I'm going to ask them, if not for my own sanity, because I've done 7 or 8 of these already. So we'll go back to, I believe Pettey is where the order falls now in District 6. Again, a kind of question that has a specific question to it, but also might allow you to broaden your scope and answer a broader issue. So the questioner asks, should undocumented immigrants be allowed to get in-state tuition at Kansas colleges and universities? So that's a 60-second response. We'll start with Pettey in District 6.
Well, undocumented children can get in-state tuition in Kansas if they've been in our public schools in Kansas for a period of time. I want to live in a state that believes that education is important for everyone. The more we talk about the haves and the have-nots, or wanting more of the have-nots, the more we are supporting unsafe communities. So education is important for everyone. And that student that's getting to go to our in-state universities is paying what another child that lives in Kansas is paying to go to in-state university. So I'm glad that our state has that legislation in place. I voted for it when it originally was passed, and I will continue to support it.
Jumping over to District 8 now, Cindy Holscher, the question to you from the audience, should undocumented immigrants be allowed to get in-state tuition at Kansas colleges and universities?
Yeah, honestly, I think Pat said it very well as far as the fact that these are children that have gone through K through 12. Nothing is being taken away from other people with in-state tuition. I want to live in a society with educated people, knowing that as I grow older, there are people who are trained to be good doctors, nurses, engineers, who can keep this economy going and, you know, keep this a wonderful state to live in.
Moving to District 11, and Karen Thurlow, the question to you again, reminding, should undocumented immigrants be allowed to get in-state tuition at Kansas colleges and universities?
I think that students that live in Kansas should pay in-state tuition, and I agree with what the senators on my right have said. I am a pro-education candidate. I want to live in a community where we have educated people. They are the next generation, and I think that it's appropriate that people that live in Kansas pay in-state tuition.
And rounding this one out, still in District 11, Kellie Warren, the question to you.
Thank you. So remember, we're not talking K through 12 education with this question. We are talking about colleges and universities. And if you reward something, you're going to get more of it. So if we reward illegal immigration, we're going to get more of it. And I don't think we should be encouraging more illegal immigration into Kansas. The chaos at the border has to stop. It's bringing in fentanyl, it's bringing in other crime. We've worked in Kansas to ban sanctuary cities for that reason. The governor agreed with that legislation. We've criminalized human smuggling. I was hearing from sheriffs, even as close by to Johnson County and Franklin County, smuggling of people going on. So we banned that in Kansas, or we can prosecute it now. And as chair of the Judiciary Committee, I will continue to be tough on crime that relates to illegal immigration. And the fewer ways we reward it, the better. We have to stop that illegal immigration, and it's really impacting our economy, and to give away taxpayer dollars with in-state tuition is not the best way to serve Kansas.
Another question from the audience. Order falls to Cindy Holscher in District 8. This audience member asks, should cities reallocate funding for law enforcement for mental health or other programs that could help get to the root cause of crime? Not sure what role the state might have in that, but maybe reframe the question as what role or what could the state do to maybe spur local policies that could address problems with crime or mental health, as this questioner asks.
Yeah, the word in there, reallocate, kind of makes me nervous, because I'm one of those individuals, similar to the teaching profession. I think we're asking a lot of our law enforcement without giving them all of the tools and all the funding they need to do all of these things. So while I do think there is definitely a role for learning of de-escalation tactics and other tools to help with mental health crises, which often law enforcement is called to act upon, we've got to provide the funding and the training for it, and it doesn't just magically happen by saying that we want to add it. I know that there's some model counties out there that have implemented some pretty good trials of additional staff hired. Again, it takes funding, so I don't think that I probably would say I don't believe in reallocating. I think we just need to fund more to address these issues and again provide the tools needed to do that work.
Over to District 11, Karen Thurlow. Again, the reader's question, as they word it, should cities reallocate funding for law enforcement for mental health or other programs that could help get to the root cause of crime? Any role for the state in this that you see?
I agree with Senator Holscher. I think that there is a huge role that mental health plays, along with a number of other social issues, in the crime that's been, issues that have been discussed here tonight. And I don't know that it's a reallocation, but an add to funding. I think that, the law enforcement officers that I have spoken to, that I know have said that having mental health resources, de-escalation training would be hugely beneficial to them in the important work that they do to keep our communities safe. And I think that the state has a role to play in making sure that those efforts are funded. I think it would benefit all of us.
Staying in District 11, Kellie Warren, again, thoughts on the state's role in potentially impacting local law enforcement policy. Again, this reader asked their framing of it. Should cities reallocate funding for law enforcement for mental health or other programs that could help get to the root cause of crime? Your thoughts?
I don't think we should reallocate funds away from our law enforcement. If we do that, first of all, it impacts the morale of law enforcement. And second of all, we've seen that experiment on the other side of state line from Senate District 11. And we've seen the impact it has had. Crime has risen. We need to make sure that the resources and the tools stay with law enforcement. I work all the time with sheriff, police officers, and prosecutors, making sure they have the resources they need to do just that. So we've got fentanyl coming in, we've got human trafficking, human smuggling, we've got organized retail theft. These are issues that I've addressed as chair of the Judiciary Committee. When I hear from law enforcement, hey, we don't have the tools we need to prosecute organized retail theft, to prosecute human smuggling, to prosecute the fentanyl distributors, to make sure we can charge those who have fentanyl around children, charge them with endangering children. So no, we should not reallocate funds away from law enforcement.
And wrapping up this question, back on the other side of the table, District 6, Pettey, your response to this question.
Well, I was a commissioner with Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, so I worked at the local level, and I have to tell you that I don't like the big brother attitude of state government at times when it comes to what local governments do, or implying that they don't use their funds well. So I would not be a supporter of passing any kind of legislation that would direct them to have to reallocate their funds. What we do need to do, and what we should continue to do, is look at, from a state perspective, of how we can help with mental health programs. We have increased mental health funding for our schools. We have provided funding for pilot programs, as Senator Holscher referred to, for our communities. But we have to also keep in mind that we need to allow our communities to use the funds that are available to them and not be dictating to them how they are used, so that they can make the best use of them for the safety and security of their community and the people that live in their communities.
We'll get you one final audience question before we end this forum. We have two more after this, so we are mindful of time. And so we'll start the order in District 11 with Karen Thurlow, and this comes from the audience as well. So kind of see it as a closing statement, a chance to say one last thing about yourself. But the question is, again, in the words of this audience member, I like to follow endorsements. Are there any groups that have endorsed you as a candidate? So we'll start with Karen Thurlow, 60 seconds.
Thank you so much. Yes, so I appreciate everyone coming out tonight and your interest and engagement in this important upcoming election. I have been endorsed, as I mentioned before. I'm a gun sense candidate, and I'm very proud of that. I've also been endorsed by Planned Parenthood of the Great Plains, and I think with all the conversation tonight around government overreach and bodily autonomy, that is a very meaningful endorsement, and I think that people hearing that will realize that that reflects well on me and my candidacy. I'm also proud to be endorsed by Stand Up Blue Valley, the public school advocacy group, Game On for Kansas, as well as the KNEA and the American Federation for Teachers Kansas branch. And just in closing, I would like to say thank you. I believe that Senate 11 and all districts across our state deserves representation. They deserve to have somebody in Topeka that listens and reflects their values, and if I'm elected, that's exactly what I will do.
So staying in District 11 and giving Kellie Warren a chance to respond to the question, I like to follow endorsements, as this reader says, so which groups have endorsed you?
Thank you, Kyle. So I'm proud to be endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, as well as the Kansas City BizPAC, which is the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. So you can see job opportunities here in Kansas, right? Opportunity to pay your bills, to buy your groceries, to buy gasoline, to get to the store to buy your groceries. Those are the folks who support me, who want reasonable tax policies, who want to make sure at the same time our schools remain fully funded without raising taxes, and who want to make sure we have good, safe neighborhoods and places to do business. So my opponent is supported by tax and spend liberal groups who just want to spend, 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 and tax more. So it's important to remember that we have a way of life and a quality of life here in Johnson County that we value. Again, whether you've lived here a long time, a short time, or grown up here like I have, let's keep it a good, thriving place to be. I have worked on results and gotten results in my first term as our senator, and those will continue to be my priorities. Lower taxes, make sure our schools stay fully funded, and public safety. Thank you.
Well, I'll give maybe both of you a chance to go back and forth a little bit, but I just give Karen Thurlow maybe a little bit of a chance to respond to that if you would like. I know it's kind of a closing statement, but also if there's any chance that you see to respond.
Well, one endorsement I also would like to go back to is I did mention that I've been endorsed by Governor Laura Kelly, and I would be remiss if I didn't add her to my list of endorsements. And I am unaware of the tax and spend liberal groups that are funding my campaign.
Okay. Kellie Warren, any final word before we move on to Pettey and City Holscher?
Thank you. I think the record of results are clear. It's one thing to talk about what you plan to do. It's one thing to have a record of results. So you can depend on me to listen to our district and get the results that are important to you.
And thank you for indulging me and spending a little bit of extra time on that race, just because that's the one where we have both candidates from both sides there. So moving back to District 6, Pat Pettey, the question to you. Endorsements, any that you have, as well as any kind of closing statement?
Well, I think I have been recognized as because I'm now running for my 4th term, so citizens of the 6th district have shown that they do support me. I've been endorsed by AFT, KNEA, Game On, I'm a Gun Sense candidate. I've been endorsed by the Great Plains Planned Parenthood, the Governor of Kansas, Governor Laura Kelly. Multiple labor organizations have endorsed me as well. I think that that's a broad group of people that have said they respect what I do and they know that I listen to them and I'm there in Topeka to support them and to vote for the best legislation for Kansas. And that's only going to happen if we have a more balanced legislature. We now have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. That has to change. And until it does change, we're going to continue to spend a lot of our time on social issues that our citizens have said, hey, why not talk about taxes?
And final word goes to Senate District 8 candidate Cindy Holscher. Your endorsements, if you have any, as well as any kind of final word that you have.
First up, I want to apologize for getting here so late tonight. I failed to mention, my mom had surgery a couple days ago and I just got back to town, so thank you for allowing me to be here. I was very committed to making sure I was here because I think this is important for people to hear where we stand on the issues. In terms of endorsements, I'm endorsed by every education advocacy group out there, AFT, Stand Up Blue Valley, Education First, Shawnee Mission, Game On, KNEA. Additionally, I'm endorsed by Moms Demand Action, Gun Sense candidate, endorsed by Governor Kelly, Planned Parenthood, BizPAC, several others too, but those are the highlights. I do want to mention something that my opponent, on the other hand, is backed by Moms for Liberty. Pretty much the opposite of myself. And for those of you who may not know, Moms for Liberty may sound innocuous, but it's connected to Proud Boys and QAnon. Very different vision for our state than what I have. I have to tell you, this will likely be the most consequential election of our lifetimes, both on the state and federal levels. With the current extremist supermajority in the legislature, there is so much that we have at risk. Our schools, our infrastructure, access to reproductive health care, and there's always the continuously looming threat to return to Brownback style policies. So my plea is that you get out and vote. If you're in my district, please vote for me so we can return some balance to the legislature.
Well, give them a round of applause for participating in something. Again, just to reiterate, invitation was made to all the candidates tonight. We had Tabitha Burt in District 6, who declined to say she wanted to knock on doors, and then Benee Hudson in District 8 did. Emailed me pretty quickly after getting the invite saying she had a long-planned family event, and so, but the invitation was there for all the candidates. I do also want to thank you, the voters in the room, as well as those watching online. Thank you for tuning in, participating in the democratic process. What's the date today? Okay, so the date to register to vote is October 15th, so that's coming up. That's in about a week. And then early voting starts October 19th. And then, of course, Election Day itself is November 5th. We're going to have 2 more forums after this. So thank you for watching this one. And see more election coverage at johnsoncountypost.com.
Situation awareness because the Andrews library. I was like, thank you so much. This was such a well-rounded event. Thanks for coming back next week.
No. I don't want to get the way of the audience. I want them to be able to hear you. So I'm like, I don't know where to speak.
It's awkward the whole way. Absolutely. Thanks, Leah.
And thank you, sir, for
being
here and paying attention.
I'm not in your district, but I hope you win. I think you've done great work for the state, for the county.
Thank you. We'll continue to be a supporter. And
Yes, thank you for coming tonight. So, where do you live?
I live in Merriam.
Okay.
So small little City, not quite as big as Shawnee.
Right.
I've heard your name before. Did you run for governor at some point?
Attorney General.
Attorney
So
General.
I was on your ballot.
Yep,
For the
I know. I've
primary.
seen
Yes,
you
sir.
before. So
Excellent. Well, tell me your name because you look familiar too.
my name's Billy Crone. I go to a lot of these events. I know even if it's not my district, you guys will pass laws that'll affect my neighbors and myself.
Yes,
so I'm very
yes.
interested
Well,
in
email
who
me.
gets
I'd
to.
love to get together and talk more. So,
Cool.
Absolutely.
I will.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Hey,
Neva.
Rose, how are you?
All right. I was sitting in the back. I'm like, hey, Dad, that's Billy.
All the cool kids in the back of the bus, right?
Right. Or something.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, I looked up Thurlow's funding. She's received $44,000 so far. That's what she filed as of the most recent filing with the state. $1,000 from Mike Kellie. Imagine that, right? Mike Kellie, the attorney. I wish
privately, and then his PAC probably at Aspera.
So I'm trying to search. I was trying to search by PAC. They don't digitize. They don't OCR it, so it's hard to dig through that data. Maybe some computer nerd needs to do that. Huh?
I know, some of those campaign finance forms are so hard to read.
Yeah.
They're like scans of copy.
Yeah. I wonder how much, when they say, tax and spend liberal groups funding a campaign, how much of that is, literally a PAC cutting a check versus a PAC sending an email to all their people saying, hey, everybody chip in 250, 300.
Dark money.
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing either way. So, yeah.
All right, so you're going to stick with the plan the rest of the evening?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna be here the entire evening. I've been posting on all these, so yeah, stick around, sit with me if you want. This chair's been empty the whole time.
Yeah.
You have a life or something?
I do.
Well, Rose, it's nice to see you here.
Thank you for doing the timing. So,
Yeah. So anyway, so we kind of had. Oh, you're good.
yeah, I feel like that was one guy.
Of course. That's how it felt. Are you guys
What?
touching on law? I think I see it. Now I was like, they're all.
Betsey?
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Glasses.
Hi, how you doing?
I wish more people turned up to this. It's kind of sadly sparse, you know?
How do I install Dennis Miller? Yeah. Okay, Charlotte emailed and said that she has a public.
I'm kind of sick too, can we just?
In the back.
I'm kidding.
Well, sorry about that. Yeah, I think to simplify the process, just start with you.
He's like,
okay.
You know what, I had a great conversation.
Well, she participates in that.
Well, I kind of went to Charlotte, with the Chamber of Commerce. You know,
I looked him up. No, I looked him up.
I really like it, but we just had different things. Okay, so I got an opening statement. Now,
To make sure you.
I'm not 100%.
I feel like it was.
It's all set up, right?
Pardon me?
All right, well, good evening and welcome to this candidate forum hosted by the Johnson County Post, featuring candidates vying for 2 Kansas House seats in Johnson County. We'll give the candidates a chance to introduce themselves shortly. This is the second of 3 forums we're hosting this evening at Lenexa City Center Library in beautiful Lenexa. All 3 of the forums that we're doing tonight are being live streamed, and the separate videos of each forum will be put on the Post Facebook page where voters can view them at any point between now and November 5th. We want to thank Johnson County Libraries for allowing use of this space tonight. We want to thank the candidates for their participation. We also want to thank those of you in attendance as well as those of you watching online. And finally, we want to thank our subscribers, more than 7,500 of you. It's your support that allows us to put on events like this and cover local elections every year like no other local news outlet does. So with all that being said, this is the second of three, so we're on a time crunch. We're already a little bit behind, so we're going to dive right into opening statements. We have two House districts here from left to right, House District 14 and House District 30. One candidate in House District 14, Charlotte Esau, emailed me today and said she's feeling a little bit under the weather. She was planning to come. She's participated in forums in the past. She's a former state rep, and so she's not going to be here tonight. And so we're actually going to start opening statements in District 14 with Dennis Miller. So we'll give each of you 1 minute to start with opening statements before we get into questions. So Dennis, if you want to begin opening statements.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that Charlotte's under the weather. We had a very good conversation with the Chamber of Commerce about 3 or 4 days ago or whatever. But Charlotte and I are very similar, except on our political opinions. And but I'm sorry that she's sick. But my district, District 14, if any of you don't know what it is, it was redistricted him at 2 years ago, and I was actually in District 15. And so then when I got into District 14, it was okay, but my district, basically, if you want to know the boundaries of it, the northern portion of it in Olathe is K10. The southern district is Harold Street. The eastern district is pretty much Ridgeview, and the western district goes out through Cedar Creek.
So we're going to give you a chance to expound on who you are and your priorities in just a second, but we'll jump to the House 30 race now on the right side of the table. And so we'll give Betsey Lasister a chance.
Close.
Lasister. Lasister.
Yes.
So I'll get better at that as the night goes on. So Betsey
Yes.
Lasister, you want to introduce yourself in the District
Sure.
30 race.
I'm Betsey Lasister. I'm proud to be the Democratic candidate in House District 30. Thank you for hosting this event, and thank you to everyone who's come out to participate. So I'm a first-time candidate. I've never held an elected office. I'm new to this whole political world, but I'm not new to Johnson County. I was raised in Overland Park by a proud Union family, and I started my professional career in Kansas public schools as a teacher. And now I'm a lawyer, I'm a mom, and I'm a small business owner with my husband, and we're raising our own family in Lenexa. I understand what's important to Kansas families because I live it every single day. I disrupted our quiet life and decided to enter politics because I saw that our current rep continued to vote against our will. I also saw that the Republican supermajority was chipping away at our rights. They were eroding public education, and they were prioritizing special interests over Kansas families. So in the State House, I will work with anyone who wants to lower costs for families, protect autonomy over our bodies, and prioritize our public schools. Thank you.
So staying in District 30, we'll now move the microphone over to Laura Williams, give a chance for her to introduce herself.
Hello, I am Laura Williams, and welcome to House District 30, where I serve as the incumbent state representative. I have lived in Lenexa long enough that there were cows here and pasture and farmland on 87th Street. So it's crazy to see the development that Lenexa has, but this is where I brought my family home to raise and grow our business here. So I started my own small business when my daughter was 4 months old. And that gave me just the perspective of different things within being an entrepreneur and a small business owner. And seeing those challenges that are faced every day. I'm a K through 12 Shawnee Mission Northwest grad, and so I see the value of our public education and why that brings people here to Lenexa, and that's one of the reasons why I brought my family here to raise them and grow our family. And also, I have been a fighter for accessible and affordable childcare and for our IDD community. So those are just some issues that I'm passionate about, but it has been an honor to serve Lenexa and Olathe over these past 2 years.
Well, we'll get to the first question. I think you picked up on it, but Leah is our timekeeper, so 30-second warning is yellow. That means you have 30 seconds left in your allotted time. Red means your time is up. We don't cut your microphones, though we can. We won't cut your microphones. That's just a courtesy to let you know that to wrap up your thought. So let's dive into the first question, starting all the State House forums with this question, because it might vary from district to district, though honestly some of the issues big issues kind of override everything, but I want to hear what you think are the priorities or the needs for your districts. So House District 30, we'll start with Betsey Lasister, and get 90 seconds for this answer for all of you. So Betsey, if you want to begin this question, biggest priority or need from residents in House District 30?
I think the most common thing I've heard at the door is that the legislature isn't listening to our vote on August 2nd, 2022. And so they really want to make sure that the candidate who represents them in the future honors their vote, respects their vote, and will continue to fight for women to have their constitutional right to personal autonomy. And then behind that, it's investing in our public schools and economic policies that benefit Kansas families, such as child tax credits.
Staying in House District 30, Laura Williams, a chance for you to respond. Biggest priority or need that you hear from the residents in this House district?
Well, this year I've knocked over thousands of doors and have talked firsthand with Lenexa and Olathe residents, and what I hear from them is the cost of living, property taxes, taxes in general, which we have been able to accomplish this past June in lowering taxes for all Kansans, but property taxes was one that we kind of fell short on, and so as we're looking at the 2025 session, property taxes have been the #1 thing I've heard at the doors, and that's what I'll continue to champion and work with our House Tax Chair on good property tax policy of lowering that and giving costs back to Kansans. Also childcare. I'm a mom and I have 2 young kids, and one of the reasons why I started my own business is because I didn't have enough money to send my kids to childcare. And so I think as we're looking at that, how can we provide more affordable and accessible childcare, especially here in Johnson County? That is a priority, not only for me, but I know that is a huge issue for families across our district. And so even, looking at property tax relief, taxes, also looking at different ways that we can help give money back when it comes to childcare. I know we'll get into taxes later, but also what we've been able to accomplish with expanding the child care tax credit, that has helped families as well. And so continuing to work on those things along with supporting our public education, making sure our schools are fully funded and have the special education that they need.
Going over to District 14, Dennis Miller, this question to you, what do you see as the biggest priority or need in this district?
From the people I talk to, the biggest priority is property taxes. And of course we worked on some of that this last this last session, but we're going to have to work harder on it because some people are being kind of priced out of their homes with the property taxes that are coming out. And but we did some good stuff in the last session. We got rid of the Social Security tax from Kansas, which was it's something that about 40 other states have already done, and it was time that we needed to do it, and we did it without any reservation as far as, okay, if you make so many $1,000 and you pay this or that. It was just, we don't pay income tax on Social Security, and also, of course, we got rid of all the tax from the state level on food, which everybody wanted, but now it's there, and we'll never go back the other way. And that's basically some of the big issues are those. Now, I can talk about, schools and reading and all that, but, and the books that are, that we want our kids to read, but taxes are the biggest thing.
So a couple of you, on that line, a couple of you mentioned property taxes prominently in your responses. What can the state do about local property taxes? Is there any kind of tax relief that the state can offer? Any policies that you would advocate for or pursue if elected or re-elected? So let's start this question with District 30, Laura Williams. And so anything the state can do about property taxes, anything that you would like to see the state pursue regarding local property taxes or tax relief?
Yeah, there's definitely some that the state can do, and I think as we're looking at increasing the exemption rate, we had that was included in our bill in June that was passed, which was 75,000. I've also voted for that number to be 100,000. And so I think we can increase that exemption rate. Also looking at our 20 mills and how maybe we can lowering that there to help give property tax relief. I think one of the things to note, even with lowering the mill levy, is that we codified in state statute that any funding that would be taken away through education would be supplemented by state general funds, and so that dollar amount would never be taken away from our schools, and I think that's important to note. Also with our seniors, how can we prioritize our seniors and our veterans in property tax relief? We have our Homestead Act programs, and this process is really confusing, I'll be honest. And we need to be better streamline that process for our seniors so that when they maybe exempt out of that that tax or that income level, there is more that can be done and they just may not be informed. So I think streamlining that process as well would benefit our senior community.
Jumping back to District 14, Dennis Miller, anything the state can do regarding local property tax relief, any specific policies that you would want to see the state pursue, anything that can be done?
Well, you know, I would actually.
A little bit forward to the microphone.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Sorry. I would like to look at, Kansas is not the only state that has problems with property tax right now. There's other states, some states have done issues like we cannot value homes more than 4% more in each year. I would kind of like to see an issue where we look at the value of the home, because that's where property taxes actually done. And we've had some great increases in value of homes in Johnson County. And it's kind of like, you know, this is crazy because of the fact that I originally bought our home for $40,000 and now it's valued at $240,000. And I think there's some problems with how we evaluate the cost of homes, because that also goes into how much tax we have to pay on homes. And so I think we have to look at that. There's some states that only allow 4% per year.
Going back to District 30, Betsey Lasister, the idea of local property taxes, anything the state can do, any specific policies, priorities that you would want to pursue if elected in your case?
Sure. So I just want to say that, you know, thanks to the prudent fiscal management of Governor Kellie's administration, Kansas is in a really good position to start putting money back into the pockets of Kansans. And I applaud the bipartisan tax effort that was passed to put money back in their pockets, but there's more we can do responsibly. As a working mom with 2 kids, again, I think a child tax care credit could alleviate the tax burden overall, which would make the impact less meaningful or less impactful. I also think it's important to diversify the tax base or where taxes are coming from, but ways we can specifically address property taxes includes reinstating the LABTR to provide relief for to potentially provide relief for all Johnson County residents. And I really think it's important that we focus on relief that benefits working Kansans and not just the top earners, like the flat tax my opponent supported.
Well, yeah, I give Laura a chance to respond to that directly. Do you support the flat tax? Do you see any benefits to that?
You know, we have made compromise. That's kind of whenever I went to Topeka, I came to have a common sense approach and to hear both sides and work together. And I think it's important to note that there were Democrats that supported that flat tax as well. But I think, you know, looking at it as a whole, we need to be able to have a common sense approach that sometimes comes with compromise and working together in a bipartisanship manner, which we have done with our tax cuts in the state of Kansas. And so that's the approach I've always had, and taking in shareholders' values and opinions is important.
Along the same lines, we've got a question from the audience. We'll start with Dennis Miller in this in District 14. The audience member asks, what would you cut from the budget to lower taxes, or would you merely raise one to lower another tax? That's this audience member's framing. So what would you cut from the tax, or would you shift that tax burden onto other taxes or revenue streams? So Dennis Miller, 60 seconds.
Yeah, could you read it again?
What would you what would you cut from the budget in order to lower taxes, or would you merely raise one tax to lower another?
You know, I would have to look at the whole situation of what we could cut. And, you know, I'm not sure that most of the stuff that we are using for our tax dollars have been discussed over a number of years. And one reason that we use our tax dollars for those is because we needed it. And so, you know, I think it's a question that's kind of iffy as far as what do you want to cut? If you understand what I'm saying, if they said, do we want to cut the money that we use on road repair, then I would say no. If you want to, you know, cut the benefits that officers are that are, you know, law enforcement people, I would have to say no. So, you know, it's kind of a question that is a little iffy, in my opinion.
Going to District 30, Betsey Lasister, what would you cut from the budget, if anything, to lower taxes, or would you merely raise one to lower another tax? That's the audience member's question. Again, but it kind of gets to the balance of taxing and spending, and so what would you maybe look at in the budget if you know that maybe the revenue would not be as great if you're lowering taxes?
It's a hard question to answer without the budget in front of me, but I can say that while I don't like paying taxes, I certainly like the thing taxes go to pay for, so it would depend on where we could make cuts. I think it's important to look at, when making cuts, who those cuts benefit, and I think it's important that cuts are benefiting hardworking Kansans and not merely corporations and the top earners of the state. I'd be interested in looking at how we can diversify tax bases, including reallocating property tax formulas, ensuring that our top earners and corporations are paying their fair share. And those are the things I would be more interested in.
And so rounding out this question, remaining in District 30, Laura Williams, the question to you, what would you cut, if anything, from the budget in order to make up for potentially lower revenues if you're lowering taxes?
Well, first off, I think it starts with, as we're cutting taxes, making sure that we are establishing a fiscally responsible budget, and that's what we have done this past year. In years prior. I also want to note, I believe my estimates are correct. In April, we collected $100 million more in taxes than we estimated for off of our previous April numbers. And then also for August, 20 million, we collected 20 million more than what was estimated. And so that just goes to show we're collecting more in taxes than we need to. And so we have the budget there to be able to provide tax relief for everyday Kansans and give more of your hard-earned money back. So, you know, as we're looking as a whole, we need to be able to budget fiscally responsibly, but also give a tax break to Kansans, everyday Kansans, and giving their hard-earned money back. And so, you know, as we're looking at this issue as a whole, that's what I take into account, and that is just where the state of Kansas is today with our over $1 billion surplus and moving forward as a state. We can continue to give back to Kansas.
All three of you mentioned education. Haley, don't cut my microphone. All three of you mentioned education in your first response about priorities, so let's ask you a question about schools. In recent years, Kansas lawmakers have debated measures that would in some way or another allow taxpayer funds to go to students and families not enrolled in public schools, including a proposed voucher program and tax credits for families in private and parochial schools. So we do get this question from readers. If elected, would you support measures that would allow the use of taxpayer dollars to go to individuals enrolled in private or religious schools? Why or why not? The order falls to Betsey, District 30.
Sure. So I began my career as a high school English teacher in Kansas public schools, and now my two kids attend Kansas public schools. And so, like so many of the constituents I talk to, our public schools are our community's greatest asset, and they truly are our best investment. I believe that 90% of Kansas students attend public schools. So I'm more interested in laws that ensure families aren't having to travel to go to schools that they think are better, and instead the schools that they have are better. So we need to we need to, I apologize, to maintain the excellent public school system that Kansans are used to, it starts with ensuring that our taxpayer dollars stay in our public schools and not used as subsidies for private schools for the wealthy. I support strengthening our schools by fully funding all aspects of public education, not by putting NRA curriculum in our schools like my opponents supported.
Well, funny enough, I have a question about the NRA curriculum. I was going to ask that next, but Laura, if you want to respond directly to that, we can just get into that issue now, but also the question about taxpayer monies going towards programs that might benefit those who want to send their children to private or parochial schools. So maybe two parts here. So let's address the voucher question first. So do you support taxpayer funds going to families or individuals sending their kids to private or parochial schools?
Can I get an extra 30 seconds
Yes.
for the response? Okay. So yeah, for me, like I stated earlier, K through 12 education, public education, so Mill Creek Elementary, Charlridge Middle School, and China Mission Northwest all have built the foundation that I have today to be able to, one, be an entrepreneur, own my own business, and be a state legislator. I just think public schools are important, and supporting our public education is definitely a priority for me. Still having teachers to this day that I get to talk to and hear the concerns in their classrooms. I do want to know, I oppose school vouchers. I've always communicated I have an independent voice for this district. I've listened to my district, and that was something that was strongly opposed, but my district strongly opposed, and so that is something I voted against. And you know, I think as I'll hit on the gun safety piece of legislation. That bill in particular just allowed for gun safety curriculum to be allowed into our schools, so our kids know what to do when they approach a gun if that were to happen that was left unattended, or how to you know, like the DARE program, how do you be able to help kids understand safety, whether that's drug safety or gun safety. And so that I've always prioritized our Kansas kids in that aspect. And so when it comes to public education and comes to our kids, they're a top priority for me because I'm a mom. I have kids too, and so. And it is a question from the audience. So Laura, you just answered, so I'll throw it back to just for 30 seconds for Betsey. This idea of the Eddie the Eagle curriculum, I believe, is what we're talking about here. It is a curriculum that is either written or sponsored by the NRA. Your position on that curriculum, whether you support it being in schools or not, Betsey?
Sure, and you know, the distinction I'd like to make is I'm not necessarily opposing gun safety curriculum, but having the NRA be the entity that teaches it is kind of where I struggle as a mom who sends her kids to public schools and is, our PTA last year, we raised a bunch of money and we get to vote on what we do, and our two options were fancy velvet curtains for the stage when they perform, or vinyl wrapping that is made to protect our schools from school shooters. And so putting the NRA in our schools is severely problematic. I'm not opposed to gun safety education generally. I'm opposed to the NRA, which she supported.
District 14, Dennis Miller, the question to you about school vouchers, and so taxpayer funds, do you support taxpayer funds being
I basically said that taxpayer money should be only used for public schools, and that's kind of my bottom line on it. I don't think it should be ever given to like Catholic schools or whatever, and that's the short answer. And I've been saying that as I go around and talk to people when they ask me the question.
And just because I asked it of House District 30 as well, but it also allows you to expound on your thoughts on guns as well. Do you support the idea of the NRA's Eddie the Eagle curriculum being in schools?
Okay, first of all, I was in the NRA, one of the few Democrats maybe that are around for, and I quit in 2016. And the reason I quit is because my knees hurt. And it's kind of a joke in a way, but they only want you, when there's a school shooting, to get on your knees and pray for the, pray for the parents and pray for the other people. And it's, they do not do anything. And I love the American Rifleman magazine that they had, but they're in the business of selling. Now the NRA is in the business of actually promoting the sales of more and more expensive guns, and many of these are assault weapons. And I don't think anybody around in this audience has an expert in M16 like I do, because I was in the military.
So,
for 30
it sounds like a no.
What's that?
So it sounds like a no. With the
Yeah, I think the NRA is a bad deal.
Okay, we'll go on to the next issue, and I think the order falls to Laura Williams in the District 30 race. This is another issue that came up in your priorities questions, at least for a couple of you, but it is a question that we got a lot about via email, and we do also get them from the index cards as well for people in the room at this forum and in previous forums. So I'll set this up with a little bit of a context. So 2 years ago, Kansas voters rejected a proposed amendment that would have explicitly stripped the right to abortion from the state constitution. But debate about abortion measures has continued in the 2 years since. In the Kansas legislature, lawmakers have debated dozens of bills seeking in some way to impact or limit abortion procedures in Kansas, or put new rules around that procedure. It's widely expected that such measures will continue to come up next year. So do you support any new restrictions or any laws governing the procedure of abortion? Why or why not? We'll give you 60 seconds to respond. We'll start with Laura Williams in District 30.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, in 2022, the people spoke, and I respect their decision, and for allowing the courts to decide that. And so I think, you know, as we look forward to what we can do, we can't keep litigating the past. It's already been decided. And so what I have always tried to have the approach in the legislature is, how can we help champion women and kids? As a mom, as a woman, you know, it is a unique perspective to provide in the legislature when it comes to women's healthcare issues, and that's why I've joined a bipartisan group of women, our Insurance Commissioner Vicki Schmidt and Governor Laura Kelly, in prioritizing women's healthcare and eliminating the costs on diagnostic mammograms, so that women don't have to decide between paying for their groceries for the month or getting an early cancer detection screening that could be preventative for them. And so I think, as we're looking as a whole, what are barriers we can eliminate for women. Also, I supported an appropriations ask for, I believe, $3 million that we were able to provide in VOCA grant funds that weren't coming through on a federal level for our domestic violence shelters. And so places like Safe Home and Sunflower House, those are resources that directly help women. And so how can we continue to provide resources for them when there's a gap in funding?
Just because this is such an asked about and hot button issue, I've been asking follow-up questions kind of based on your initial answer. So for Laura, you know, you can tell me your voting record on some of these measures that have come up over the past 2 years. The survey asking women, abortion providers asking certain questions of women about why they're getting the procedure, funding for pregnancy resource centers. So these types of measures that have come up, have you voted for those? And if you support those, we do have readers who do see those measures as either being invasive or at least against the spirit of the 2022 vote. So how do you see that? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know for anyone in the room who has personally had to be in that hospital room or doctor's office where they've had to make the difficult decision of getting a DNC, but I have. And so for me, this is a personal issue, and I don't think it's a political one. So when it comes to understanding why a woman is choosing abortion, I supported that bill. I think that it's helpful for us to know where can we as a state provide additional resources for women, and you know, making sure that they have what they need in the state of Kansas. And so when it comes to this issue, it is a deeply personal one, and I understand women are frustrated on both sides of the aisle, but I've always tried to come together with both pro-life and pro-choice groups to bring common sense legislation to Kansas to make sure that women and kids are protected and have the resources they need.
Going to District 14, Dennis Miller, the question to you: do you support any new laws that would govern the procedure of abortion, especially in the context of the 2022 vote? Why or why not?
Well, okay, it's me, right? Okay. I actually think it's a woman's right to choose. I'm a male. I would never have an abortion, but it's kind of a joke. No one's laughing, but I don't think that it's up to the woman to decide if that's the best choice for her. And the law we have currently in Kansas is not a Wendy's drive-through abortion type of thing. You go in you discuss it with the people in the abortion clinic, and it used to take, I don't know if it really does anymore because I'm not really involved in it, but it used to take more than 24 hours to come back and have the abortion. And I don't know if that's the case anymore, but it's not a case where you are doing it immediately. What you do is they give you an ultrasound, if I'm not mistaken, and then the next day you come in and you
Well,
give
so
them your choice.
the follow-up question to you is then, we do have plenty of readers who.
Pardon me?
We have plenty of readers who voice the opinion that the state has a compelling interest in protecting unborn life. And so if this is your position on abortion, how do you respond to those constituents, those readers, those viewers?
Well, I kind of look at Roe, I look at where is life starting, and we're talking about a 90-day window, if I'm not mistaken, on the current abortion laws in the state of Kansas. And is that if they are not being able to survive out of the womb on that issue, then they're not really a life. I mean, I'm kind of, I'm not really that concerned with it, in that we voted on it. 61% of the people in the state in Johnson County said that they wanted the woman to have the right to choose.
Going to House District 30, Betsey, I think you're rounding out this issue, so any new restrictions, laws that govern the procedure in the context of the vote 2 years ago? What's your position on this? If elected in your case, how would you approach it?
Sure, so Kansans have a constitutional right to personal autonomy, and I was an attorney for the Kansas Supreme Court when the case that was a precursor to the Value Them Both Amendment was decided, so I have a solid, clear understanding of how well regulated abortion care already is in Missouri, or in Kansas, I apologize. And if anything, that just solidified the fact that the government has no say in a woman's decision. On August 2nd, 2022, nearly 70% of our district rejected Value Them Both, an amendment my opponent proudly supported. And despite the clear will of constituents, one of them being me, she continued to vote for policies that put the government in between women and their doctors, and that is quite frankly why I am here today. For example, she helped pass a law requiring doctors to report our personal health care information to the government. I believe the government has no business getting between you and your doctors, and I will always fight for a woman's constitutional freedom over her own body.
We'll let Laura respond, but the follow-up question to you, you respond to what she said earlier, that such measures, the type that you're talking about, the surveys, the questions, that those actually, as a woman, she valued those, that those could make the procedure safer, that could make the process safer, that could give the state valuable information, doesn't necessarily infringe on the right of abortion that's already protected by the state Supreme Court ruling and enshrined even more by the 2022 vote. How do you respond to that? Betsey, yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought you,
Yeah.
I just wholeheartedly disagree that providing the government personal health information does anything other than intimidate, threaten, and weaken our right. Kansas women and men very clearly said they want the government out of our personal medical decisions, and the survey law does precisely that. It requires our doctors to report our information. There's just no way around these bills chipping away at the rights. So the statement that that Republicans have listened to our vote, I just completely disagree with. It's invasive, and I can't think of another instance where doctors are required to report medical information to the government to benefit healthcare, especially when the legislature is not made up of medical professionals. We have doctors, schools, the Board of Healing Arts. Those are the type of bodies, regulatory bodies with the expertise not the legislature.
And we'll give Laura just 30 seconds to respond directly to this idea that with these votes, with the support of these measures, you're not listening to the constituents in your district. 30 seconds to respond to that.
Yeah, again, we have not done nothing to restrict abortion. I just think to collect better information, and even when we're looking at that form, it's not required to fill out or give answers to. And so I just think, for women, we need to continue to provide better funding for them, and what better way to do that than help fund our domestic violence shelters, which the federal government has decided not to come through on their Violence of Crime Act, I believe. I think that's what VOCA stands for, Violence of Crime Act, yep, grant funds. And so, there are different resources that we can be able to help women, and it gives us a better understanding of what's going on. But, we can move forward from that, and there are no votes I have taken that restrict abortion.
Okay, we'll go to another issue, and it comes directly from the audience. We'll have a couple time for maybe a couple more questions, but the order falls to Dennis Miller in District 14. This is from the audience. As a legislator, you must make decisions that impact all Kansans. With that in mind, what will you do to help the burdens on the poorest and least fortunate Kansans? Is how this reader frames the question. So what would you do to help the poorest Kansans? 60 seconds.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm in the Welfare Reform Committee, and I guess that is directly talking to your question. And we have a situation in Kansas now, and the whole United States has, of people that are homeless, and we have to look at how we can help those people. And sorry, I was chastised for not having my microphone up, but we need to look more into getting these people back into society where they're useful members, and it's a difficult decision because we have to put money into the funds that are welfare, which I don't like the term to be, but as far as
final thought, yeah.
Okay. Well, basically, what we need to do is to help the poorest people get back into society as useful members of society.
Going to House District 30, Betsey Lasister, what would you do to help the burdens on, the way this reader puts it, the poorest and least fortunate Kansans? 60 seconds.
Couple of things. One, as I've already said, fully funding all aspects of public education, including special education, to ensure that all Kansas schools are the excellent quality we know and love here in Johnson County, because education is kind of the baseline for opportunities. Second, again, tax policies that benefit hardworking Kansans, not the ultra wealthy like the flat tax my opponent supported. Fully supporting mental health resources to address some of the barriers to either obtaining more employment or housing. And then again, Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion is a win for Kansas. It ensures access to preventative care for folks who don't have it. And healthy Kansans are productive workers, caregivers, community members. Aside from saving lives, it'll save money in rural Kansas hospitals. And so I think that also the experts in the field, chambers, medical providers, healthcare providers, employers, have all made it clear that expanding Medicaid would be good for our economy and our community.
And staying in District 30, Laura Williams, the questioner from the audience, what will you do to help the burdens on the poorest and least fortunate Kansans? 60 seconds.
Yep, so we've been able to accomplish some things, like I served on the committee and conference committee where we worked on the urban and rural housing tax credit, so it actually helps provide more affordable housing in lower income urban areas, and the tax credit in and of itself has helped grow rural communities as well. So I know we're talking about Lenexa and Olathe, but overall, looking at Kansas, we've been able to increase new housing in rural Kansas. I serve on an energy committee where we have lowered the cost of energy, and I think, as you're looking at your energy bill, especially when we get into the winter months, it gets very expensive, especially in the summer. And how can we be able to give money back to Kansans? And so we've worked on that, especially here in Kansas City felt the biggest impact from that, which is great. Also lowering the cost of living. I think, as we're looking overall, we want to be able to provide ways that we can give back to Kansans who need it most. I think especially as we're looking at Lenexa and Olathe, we had the homeless shelter that got put in, or that had a vote on it. I think it's important to note that my opponent's supporters supported the homeless shelter, and I just don't think that that's a good way to spend money, and that is one way that I think that as Kansas, we need to make sure that we're funding real solutions and not ones that will bring crime and drain our city and county's budgets.
Well, one final question, but give Betsey a chance to respond directly to that. I think referencing maybe your supporters, but looping you in with that. But the homeless shelter in Johnson County do you see solutions like that as potentially feasible? Though maybe the state wouldn't necessarily have control over that exact project, but maybe just respond to that criticism.
I think her comments are viewed through the lens of misinformation about who's homeless in Kansas, especially Johnson County. 40% of the folks who attend or visit Project 1020, the other homeless shelter, are actually employed. So almost half of them have jobs. And homeless folks are more likely to be the victims of crime, of physical crime, than they are to perpetrate it. So again, maybe that wasn't the right solution, but I think it's really important to address solutions for the unhoused in Kansas through a lens that actually understands the causes of homelessness without relying on stereotypes.
Final question for the three of you, and it was asked in the last forum, and I thought it served as a good way to get to know you maybe a little bit more and get to say a final word. And so a question in a previous forum, maybe they're still here, but either way they asked the question about endorsements. They say, I like to follow endorsements. Which groups have endorsed you as a candidate? So the order falls to Betsey Lasister in the District 30 race, and so the three of you will get a chance to answer this question for a minute. This will be the final question. So Betsey, go ahead and
Sure.
start us off.
I am endorsed by, or I'm an approved K&E candidate and other pro-public education organizations. I got an F from the NRA. That might be the first F in my entire life. I am supported by many local unions as the child of a proud union electrician who's here tonight. Many unions support me. I am also supported by Governor Kelly. Hang on, I have a list. Again, not a politician, and Gun Sense, all sorts of Gun Sense organizations support me.
Staying in District 30, Laura Williams, any endorsements that you have that you would like to share with the audience? Again, based on the question from the previous forum.
Yeah, so I was trying to think off the top of my head because I was not prepared for this question, but the National Federation of Independent Business, Greater Kansas City, BizPAC, as you knock House District 30, you could go down my neighborhood and ask my neighbors, am I a good neighbor? And they'd probably say, yes, I am. I think it's important to note my long-standing time in the community and my work that I've done through volunteer work of helping people make Lenexa and Olathe feel more like home. Those are things that I prioritize. I'm just a mom. I'm a small business owner. I never imagined that I would get to serve my community through the state legislature, but honestly, it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to do it this last 2 years. I continue the conversation with each one of you in the room. I know that there are supporters and of the other side of the aisle that we've had conversations on of issues that are important. And after the election, I would love to continue the conversation as well as issues that are important to you. But I've always been open for a cup of coffee, so don't ever hesitate to reach out and tell me the issues that are important to you.
And ending things in the District 14 race, and again, I'll say the invite was extended to Charlotte Esau, feeling under the weather, so she's not here, so it falls to Dennis Miller again. Any endorsements that you've had, and any final word?
Well, I'm kind of joking about this, sorry. But I think my biggest endorsement is that I won 2 years ago. I got the endorsement of the people that I represent. But I'm also, I've got endorsements from the KNEA and another teachers union, and I have gotten quite a bit of money from labor unions, so I got their endorsement. But my favorite endorsement is I got one from an animal rights union or whatever, but it's a cat's paw. and that's kind of my favorite endorsement that I've gotten. But I've gotten some other ones from animal rights groups too. So basically, you know, endorsements mean a lot, but it's the endorsement of the vote that's the biggest endorsement.
Give them a round of applause for participating in this forum hosted by the Board of I believe just the invitation was extended. Charlotte Esau emailed me today, just wasn't feeling up to it, or was feeling under the weather, so we hope that she gets better. But thank you to the candidates who participated in this. Again, just final reminders, last day to register to vote in Johnson County and Kansas at large is Tuesday, October 15th. Early voting starts Saturday, October 19th. That's in about a week and a half. And of course, election day is November 5th. We have another forum after this. So thank you so much. And all of our election coverage you can find at johnsoncountypost.com. Good night.
What?
Yeah. Okay, if you're going to remain in the room, we're going to do one more forum, and we're going to try to get it going just because it's already 7:20. So if you want to talk or converse or aren't going to stay, please go ahead and try to make your way out as quickly as possible. I'm not trying to kick you out, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Charles.
Are you okay?
Do you need more milk carts?
I think I'm good.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I don't want you to spin it.
I'm not gonna spin it.
Not here.
It's just like
Well, I think she was, so she was. I'll tell you what.
Okay.
Betsey, I'd like to ask about the 1%. You mentioned you don't support taxes that benefit the 1%.
That's not what I said.
Oh, it's not?
No, I said the flat tax.
Are you recording her?
Are you in charge of me?
Are you recording
Are you
her?
interrupting
He
me?
was holding flashcards at me the whole time when I
You
was
were holding
talking.
flashcards?
He was.
Are
He
you-
would say false. And he was making hand gestures at me the whole time.
I've given thumbs up and thumbs down to people on both sides of the aisle. You're not in charge of me, so I'm going to ask you not to touch me.
I'm not touching you.
Okay.
I'm just holding
Well,
that
make
up.
sure you don't.
Okay, I'm not, but you don't
And
record
please
people
don't
without-
interrupt me also.
Yes, you're recording people without their permission. Just
It's
for
a
today.
public
Yeah,
forum.
for real.
If you,
You're holding
Who?
up signs calling people a liar. That is shameful.
who are you again?
You're holding up signs calling people liars.
When they lie.
Shame on you.
Who are you?
Shameful.
Who are you to come up between two other people and interrupt them?
To hold up a card saying liar to people who are trying to get those votes.
Criminal. It's called speech. And, well, not really. It's silence, but for one. But
He's been holding signs up here. I didn't know that. It's incredible. That just shows how small. No, you're recording me now too, and I really think that's just.
you got in front of me and got my attention.
I didn't know you were holding up signs calling people liars or.
Are you in charge of anything here? I mean, honestly. I would like to know if you.
Just my own integrity, and I would never hold a sign up.
Is there a code of conduct for the Moms Demand Action?
There needs to be a code of conduct, yes.
Does Moms Demand Action have a code of conduct? I'm curious. Is there something I can read somewhere?
Tomorrow I call stuff. It's been like 2.5 weeks I haven't been able to do it.
Gotta go. Sorry, thank you,
That is a rocking mustache, a rocking beard. Love it.
No.
You sure?
Which one of you is going?
I don't care. I'll go first, because I'm gonna let you late.
First.
Okay, give me like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
Maybe get the water bottle.
You got any questions back? Can you keep up with you?
Yes, sir.
You've been told you're making hand gestures to some of the candidates?
A thumbs up, right thumbs down?
Yeah, that's what you've been told.
Silently?
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
No, I think we don't, no more gestures to the candidates. You can be here.
Okay.
You can record. Just like, refrain from interacting with the candidate.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think Kyle.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
I'm thinking about it. I've been silent, obviously.
yeah.
I've not
Yeah, no,
interrupted
you're not-
anything.
you're not interrupting anything.
I think we all have the right to smile, to frown.
of course.
I'm not hooting and hollering.
Yeah,
So
well, it was more, from what we've been told, it was more than just thumbs up.
it was a thumbs up, a thumbs down. Okay.
We'll just say.
When I've heard a lie, I showed this from my seat, again, without interrupting anyone.
No.
Some people will wear a message on their shirt,
Yeah.
right? I'm not.
Yeah, I get it.
So I've been silent.
Okay.
I will continue to be silent during the forums.
All right, good evening and welcome to this, not ready yet. Good evening and welcome to this candidate forum hosted by the Johnson County Post featuring candidates vying for 2 Kansas House districts. We'll give them a chance to introduce themselves shortly. This is the 3rd of 3 scheduled forums that we're hosting here at Lenexa City Center Library in Lenexa. All 3 of the forums that we do tonight are being live streamed, and separate videos of each forum will be put on the Post Facebook page so that voters and readers can go back and watch them at any point between now and November 5th. We want to thank Johnson County Library for allowing the use of this space tonight. I hear the sound of vacuums in the background, so we know that we're late. We know we're staying past our bedtimes because they're telling us that we're cleaning up and leaving. We want to thank the candidates for their participation and attendance tonight. Those 2 that are here will, again, allow them a chance to introduce themselves. I want to thank those of you in attendance as well as those of you online watching this now and later and participating in the democratic process. And we want to thank our subscribers as well, the more than 7,500 people who support and allow us to put on events like this during election season. So with that being said, this is going to be a little bit different because we only have 2 of the 4 candidates here. Again, just like in the previous forums, invitations have been extended to all the candidates. And so I would say, unfortunately, we only have 2 of the 4 candidates here tonight, and they're both from the same party. So this is going to be rather short. We're going to give them certainly a chance to share their views and share who they are, but it will be a little bit different feeling because you're not going to get some of the contrast you might get if the other candidates have been able to be here. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it and allow the candidates a chance to introduce themselves. So we'll follow the same format, opening statements, same questions, time to respond, but it'll just be a little bit shorter and might feel a little bit different. But again, we appreciate you being here. So let's start in House District 49, and that is Nikki McDonald. So give Nikki a chance to introduce herself for 1 minute.
Hi. I'd like to start by thanking the Johnson County Post and the Johnson County Library for hosting this forum tonight. My name is Nikki McDonald, and I have the honor of being the current representative for Kansas House District 49, which covers portions of southeast Olathe and southwest Overland Park. My professional background is in teaching first grade and English language learners. In fact, I taught in Olathe at Fairview Elementary before my husband and I started our family. I'm now a stay-at-home mom of 2 high school sons. Last November, my state representative very unexpectedly stepped down, and I was elected by precinct leaders to represent House District 49 in late December. I hit the ground running in January, serving the entirety of the 2024 season. I have found this work to be fulfilling and impactful, so I am running for re-election. Tonight, I'm grateful to be able to participate in this forum and to have this opportunity to articulate my focus and perspective, as well as my priorities and experiences in this role.
Well, thank you, Nikki. Again, this district covers portions of Olathe and Overland Park. I will say her Republican opponent, Kurtis Ruf, was extended the invitation, actually said this day at work. Heard from him yesterday that he now has a conflict, and so we do get conflicts. This is a busy time of year, but got that message yesterday, so just want to point that out. So let's go to District 5 now, and Henry Johns has traveled a long way to get here, so we really do appreciate that. And so, Henry, if you want to introduce yourself and also talk about your district.
Well, I'm Henry Johns. I'm running for the 5th House District. The 5th House District extends from western Douglas County all the way across to Spring Hill in Johnson County, down to Osawatomie in Miami County, then back up and around Wellsville in Franklin County. I spent 48 years in healthcare as a respiratory therapist and a manager. I retired. I wanted something quiet and relaxing to do, so I became a substitute teacher. I did all that in the middle of COVID. And 2 years ago, when I realized there was only one name on a ballot, I decided that wasn't quite right for our democratic republic. And since nobody else was stepping up, I decided to step up and run.
And I will say your opponent, current Representative Carrie Barth, she did actually email me pretty soon after the invitation and said that she had trying to work out a date, had a conflict with a breast cancer fundraiser tonight in another county, not in Johnson County, so that's where she is at. That's what message she asked to pass along. So we do have these two candidates here. Again, it's going to be more of a quick back and forth. You're probably going to hear a lot of the same opinions and same positions because they are both Democrats, but we want to at least give them a chance at the floor. They came tonight, and so allow them a chance to voice their priorities and their opinions and stances as well. Nikki went first on opening statements, so let's give Henry a chance to respond to the first question. Again, we've been allowing all the candidates a chance to talk about what they believe to be the biggest priorities and needs for their particular district. You just described District 5, so Henry, what do you think are the biggest needs for the constituents in that district?
District 5 is very big, very diverse, and as I've been knocking on doors, the one topic that keeps coming up is taxes, especially property taxes. I think the second thing that comes up is a woman's right to control her own body. And then public schools come up. So there's never just one pat answer as you go through a district.
Nikki McDonald in District 49, the biggest priorities, needs that you see or hear from your constituents in that district.
Thank you for the question. My constituents worry broadly about affordability, and I certainly share their concerns. I know what it's like to do without, to stretch every dollar, and to struggle without a safety net to fall back on. As the representative for this district, I knew that our state's budget surplus should be used to reduce the tax burden on everyday people. And that's why I voted to pass a massive tax cut bill benefiting seniors and working class Kansans in April and in late June. This included lowering property taxes, lowering sales taxes, and ending state social security taxes and more. It's a top priority of mine to find additional ways to lower our property taxes even more next session, but it's also very important for me to be fiscally responsible and to find sustainable solutions. Another issue that's important to the people in our district is public school funding. We currently fall short on funding special education, which causes students to have to use their general fund to make up for the shortfalls. Last year, Olathe School District had to take $32 million from the general fund to make up the deficit, and I helped negotiate another $75 million to be allocated this year to fund special education. We were still $346 million short on funding special education, so we have work to do. And I know I'm almost out of time, but thirdly, our district really does prioritize reproductive rights. 66% of our district voted no on the constitutional amendment to take away our reproductive rights. In my opinion, politicians have absolutely no business interfering with private medical decisions made between patients and their providers. Hard to stop.
Well, both of you mentioned taxes. We have we have many readers asking us about more relief, more tax cuts, particularly around residential property taxes. Of course, that is a local concern mostly, but is there anything the state can do to offer any more relief to any of the constituents in District 49, Nikki, about property taxes? So we'll start with that issue first. 60 seconds for you.
I had a suspicion you would ask me that. As a member of the super minority this year, it was really, really frustrating that the extremist Republicans in leadership of the House and Senate were unwilling to even include Democrats in any meaningful way when it came to governing. These extremist Republicans say that they're all about reaching across the aisle. You've heard some of that tonight. But my experience this session has shown that they never needed to try to compromise because they had the numbers to override the governor's vetoes. It was very disheartening. During the session this spring, we had several versions of tax cut bills. My priorities were lowering property taxes and ending state social security taxes, as well as accelerating the ending of the food taxes. Ultimately, we were able to accomplish 2 of those goals and more. I appreciate Governor Kelly's clearly stated concerns that we have to make decisions that are deliberate and incremental so that they are sustainable. Now we have a surplus, thanks to Governor Kelly and Lieutenant Governor Tolan's excellent leadership. But that may not be the case in the future. So I think we have to make really careful decisions. And
Finish that thought. I was going to ask you a follow-up question, but finish that thought.
I think it's really important to, when we make our decisions, to look at projections for the next several years, because we may not always be in a good financial position.
Well, you mentioned the surplus, and we've had readers say, well, if you have that surplus, let's use it. Let's give it back to the citizens. Let's give more tax relief. And so specific policies you'd be looking at in 2025 to offer more tax relief, tax cuts if possible. Where would you want to go?
Yeah, I think that in the 11th hour on the legislative session, we had a really good opportunity to cap property taxes, particularly for seniors. I think the 11th hour bill had to do with disabled veterans. But the Republican leadership threw in some bad bills with this. They bundled bills. We never vote on any clean bills. And so the bills that they put into this would have been very harmful for municipalities. So ultimately we had to vote against a bill that would have helped end property tax for disabled veterans, which I think is unconscionable. And again, this was 11 p.m., the last night of the end of the session. That's the kind of leadership we have in the Kansas legislature, and when we break the Republican supermajority, things will be different.
Well, certainly would love to have some Republicans respond. We can't do that tonight. Henry Johns, the question for you about taxes, any more tax cuts, tax relief that you would want to pursue, specific policies. We would mention the surplus. We mentioned the idea that readers want to see more relief, especially around property taxes. Where would you want to go?
You know, the local ad valorem tax relief fund existed since 1937. And it worked extremely well, giving state tax money back to the counties, which allowed the counties to keep the mill levies low on property taxes, because that's their only resource to raise funds to pay for services. My opponent, I wish she'd been here tonight, voted against funding that this year. And then she voted to get rid of it completely. It's something that needs to be brought back. Along with that, we need to reduce the percentage of the appraisal that is taxed. It's currently at 20%. We need to drop that. We need to exempt the first $100,000 of a home's value. And those three things would help give money back to the counties and lower our mill levies and our property.
And this is the question we get from the audience. We got it in a previous forum as well, but if we're talking about lowering taxes, would there be any accompanying cuts to the budget? Would you look at spending while also anticipating maybe lower revenues?
You know, I believe that you should always look at spending every year, but I believe in what you could call 5-year plans. Now, a 5-year plan says what? It says you're going to have to look 5 years into the future. You're going to have to anticipate what your income's going to be. You're going to have to look at what your reserves are and figure out what you need to keep providing the services that people expect. Because we all know that once we start receiving a service, you don't want it cut. You want to keep receiving that service.
Nikki McDonald in District 49, the idea of cutting or looking at spending, if you're also thinking about lowering taxes or instituting more tax cuts, anticipating lower revenues, are there any parts of the budget you would look at potentially cutting or any programs that you would anticipate reviewing?
So I voted no on the budget. It was really frustrating to me to have so much pork shoved in at the last minute. This is a very thick document. And there's a process in the Appropriations Committee where, you know, you can just like ask for a thing and some people might get it. And when you have, when one legislator has more influence on the spending than the other legislators, I think that's inappropriate. And there was quite a bit of pork in our budget. So I think there are some specific line items that we could cut. But in the end, a budget's a reflection of our priorities. And I think our budgets should look a little bit more reflective of the priorities that the people of Kansas have.
Another issue asked about a lot is education. Governor Laura Kelly has said for 6 consecutive years that K-12 education in Kansas is or has been fully funded. Both her and Republican legislative leaders have trumpeted that in the past year as well. A funding bill passed this year also boosts funding for special education. Not quite up to the level of what the state board recommends, but still it is a boost nonetheless after a long, rather drawn out fight over that. The funding situation is remedied enough that the Kansas Supreme Court no longer oversees the funding process from the Gannon case. So going into 2025, are there any big remaining challenges or priorities for K-12 school funding that you would want to address if, in your case, Nikki, re-elected? But I believe, I'm forgetting the order, but I believe it starts with you now, or is it Henry? There's only 2 of you and I've lost the order already. We'll start with
We can
Nikki.
flip a
We'll
coin.
start with Nikki. 60 seconds on this.
Always start
Any
with Nikki.
remaining challenges for K-12 school funding?
Yes. My colleagues are not necessarily trustworthy when it comes to funding all of education historically. So I come into this job with a bit of skepticism. I serve on the Education K-12 Budget Committee and the Literacy Advisory Committee. Whoever is elected this November is going to be tasked with looking at our complex school finance formula, potentially changing it because the funding formula that we use now expires July 1st of 2027. So as a teacher, a mom, and a strong public school advocate, I'm pretty well versed in school finance, and I'll take an active role in any changes that we make in the Education K-12 Budget Committee. And school finance is complex. Sending me back to Topeka will ensure that we have an experienced advocate at the table looking out for the interests of Olathe and Blue Valley kids. Secondly, improving the reading proficiency of all Kansas school children is a big priority of ours. Studies show that a decline in proficiencies across the country. It looks like I'm out of time.
Finish the thought. Yeah, finish the just.
All right.
So what is time really? Finish the thought.
So this past spring, my colleagues and I passed a bill called the Blueprint for Literacy, and we'll be implementing it over the next 3 years. We've created a bipartisan committee called the Literacy Advisory Committee. Its task. Stakeholders are tasked with changing the lives of 40% of the Kansas school children who are not proficient at reading.
Henry Johns, the question to you, biggest challenges, priorities remaining for K-12 school funding, now that in the past 6 years, Governor Laura Kelly has boasted, fully funded schools. So what remains going into 2025 for you?
It was fully funded under court supervision. Now that that court supervision is gone, the legislature can do whatever it feels like with that funding formula. Now, not knowing much about school funding, one of the first things I did in my district is I started meeting with the school superintendents of each school district in the 5th House District. And you know what? It was amazing that all of these people told me exactly the same story over and over, that no, it was not fully funded. They had to juggle left and right, rob Peter to pay Paul. They had to worry about transportation. Special education was nowhere near funded. And they have a constant fear of a voucher giveaway that will take funds away from their schools. Public dollars are for public schools. And that's one thing that when I've knocked on doors, people have been very insistent upon. They pay taxes to support their schools.
Another question, one of the most asked questions or topics we got asked about in the lead up to these forums via email from readers when we asked what they wanted to be asked about. It was abortion. I suspect with both of you representing the same party, we might hear some of the same things. Don't want to make assumptions, but give you a chance to voice your positions on abortion, especially in light of the 2022 vote, where you think things stand, and if elected or re-elected, how would you go about tackling that issue, also considering just the weight of the partisan balance in Topeka. So we'll start with Henry here, 60 seconds.
All right. I think this should be a rather simple question, and that is, if you're opposed to abortion, don't get one. Simple as that. This is the decision that a woman has to make with her significant other, her doctor, and her God, and nobody else. And it's not a politician's place to be in a medical exam room.
Nikki McDonald, the question to you.
Well, when it comes to reproductive rights, the difference between myself and my opponent, who didn't bother to come tonight, is quite clear. My opponent promises to never advocate for a total abortion ban. That's it. That's all he says. And I think that's really weak. I can do better than that. I have always fought to protect reproductive freedom. My votes on the Health and Human Services Committee and on the House floor reflect that stance without exception. I would never, as a politician or as a regular human, presume to tell another woman what she has to do with her body. I take a libertarian stance on this. The government does not have the right to dictate what women do with their own bodies. I don't think we can trust my opponent with this, given that he's only willing to publicly say that he won't completely take away rights to abortion. these are not his rights to take away. These are inherent rights that we have as human beings.
And a follow-up question to both of you. So if abortion opponents say there is a compelling state interest in protecting unborn life, moves to do that by, say, allocating funding for pregnancy resource centers that promote alternatives to abortion are cast as a way to give women safety and support during pregnancy and childbirth. Such measures have been debated and passed. I think might be, some of them are being challenged in court right now, but you might very well be faced with debates like this in 2025. So your response to the idea that such laws do not infringe on the right to abortion that's already been established by the Kansas Supreme Court, that they merely make the process safer and give the state valuable information, that's what we've heard from Republicans. And we'll start with Nikki here.
So I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee, and we did debate several of these bills. As far as the, I call it the justify your abortion bill, where they ask you a lot of intrusive questions before letting you go through the process.
Pause there.
The library will be closing in 15 minutes. Please take materials to a self-check for checkout. Computer and copier access will be terminated in 15 minutes. If you need to have a library card made, please go to a questions desk. Thank you for visiting the Johnson County Library.
We paused your time, so continue there, but yeah.
When we had this committee meeting, you know, I heard Representative Williams earlier say that people just don't have to answer if they don't want to. The Democrats on that committee tried to amend the bill so that we could put in the wording, this answering this is optional, and every Republican on the committee voted no. So that's very telling to me. Republicans are often sneaky like that, and I think that it's really important for us as legislators to be really straightforward and honest with people. That is an example of a bill that intrudes on a woman's right. It takes away her dignity, and it dehumanizes her in a way that's unacceptable.
And Henry Johns, the question to you, the response to the idea that the measures that have been debated the past 2 years don't infringe on the right to abortion that has been established by the Kansas Supreme Court. We've heard Republicans say this is a settled issue. The voters have spoken that the measures that have been debated the last 2 years really just kind of try to make the process safer, more secure. Your response to that?
The voters did speak 2 years ago, and they did say no. And the legislature, the Republican legislature, has failed to pay attention and listen. And no, everything they have done has been deliberately formulated to chip away at women's rights. My opponent voted in favor of all of it, consistently voting against women's rights.
The next question is one we also get often, and a couple questions from the audience as well. It relates to gun violence. We did get this question directly from a reader via email. They said, quote, in Kansas, the rate of gun deaths increased 32% from 2012 to 2021. The rate of gun suicides increased 14%. Gun homicides increased 102%. They were using data from the advocacy group Every Town for Gun Safety. This reader via email goes on, quote, it is evident that we need to do something in Kansas to curb these growing numbers, end quote. So is there any piece of gun-related legislation you would support that you think would reduce gun deaths and injuries in Kansas? What are the priorities for you on this issue? We'll start with Henry Johns in District 5.
Well, to start with, I'll give a disclaimer and say that as a disabled veteran, I am considered a distinguished life member of the NRA. I have been for years. I'm a gun owner. I love shooting. I love shooting sports. That doesn't stop me from supporting and being in favor of safe storage and safe handling of firearms. I think the majority of those deaths are just like the deaths of children. A firearm was accessible, it was loaded, and it was right there, and someone used it to solve a momentary problem in a permanent way. And that could have been prevented if that firearm and that ammunition had been safely stored and locked away. That's a practice my father taught me. It's a practice the military reinforced. You don't carry loaded weapons around. You keep them locked up in a place unless you need to use them.
Going over to District 49, Nikki McDonald, the question to you, any piece of gun-related legislation you would support that you think would reduce gun deaths and injuries, again, in the wordings of this question or via email. Any gun-related legislation you would support, why or why not?
Sure. I've earned a candidate distinction from Moms Demand Action, and I'm endorsed by Every Town for Gun Safety. I'm also a lifelong gun owner, raised by hunters and veterans. My dad and grandfather taught me that firearms are tools, and those who own them should be responsible. For example, I believe in safe storage. Representative Featherston introduced House Bill 2413, which would require gun owners to use safe storage for firearms. They could not even get a committee hearing for this bill. Representative Hoagland tried to amend a bill on the House floor implementing some measures from the safe storage bill, and it was immediately voted down. The extremist Republican leadership is beholden to the Kansas Rifle Association and the NRA, so they never even allow discussion about gun regulation or laws or even gun violence as a whole. In fact, there was a hearing this session to make it harder to pass gun safety laws, like keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. So until we have real conversations about potential solutions to address the rise in gun violence, nothing's going to be done.
And a follow-up question for both of you along this issue, but more specific. It relates to guns in schools. We do have a question from the audience. Does it make kids safer in school to prohibit responsible adult staff from carrying a weapon that could be the most effective defense instead of, as this questioner says, hold terrifying drills every month? So give staff members who may want it or may be trained the ability to carry a weapon in schools. Your response to that? We'll start with Nikki McDonald.
Sure. In Olathe and Blue Valley schools, we are really fortunate to have licensed SROs in our schools. I take the stance that if it's a law enforcement officer, it's very appropriate that they be armed. But as a former teacher, I take issue with the possibility that someone could be working in an environment and not know which coworker's carrying a gun or how they're storing it. So as a rule, if they're a law enforcement officer, I can see justification. It's because they have training, there's insurance involved, but my first experience in the Kansas legislature was testifying in the insurance committee against this notion. So I'm pretty opposed to it, except for law enforcement officers.
So moving over to District 5, Henry Johns, the question to you may be posed a different way, but do you support allowing staff who want it, who have been trained to carry guns in schools, if that would be a good mode of defense?
Our police officers are trained to use firearms. They are firearms experts. They train on a regular basis, sometimes weekly in some departments. And yet, when there's a police-involved shooting, many times there's bystanders hit. An officer will empty an entire magazine from a weapon and might hit the perpetrator once. And, you know, that's something that someone who's highly trained, when they get in that situation, even though they're highly trained to deal with it, they have difficulty with that. School teachers are trained to teach. They're not trained to be police officers. So no, having people carry firearms in a school does not make children safer. And earlier this evening, you asked about 18-year-olds carrying firearms on college campuses. I totally disagree with that, which is why the NRA gave me a C rating, because we don't let anybody drive a car without a license. And what is that license? That is your documentation that you have proven yourself to be proficient and that you know the rules of the road. Why would we give somebody a firearm without any type of training or license?
Time for a couple more questions, and I will just note at 7:55 there will be another warning announcement that's going to close. We'll be fine when they're not going to kick us out. We have library staff right here watching, and they're but just in case it comes up while you're speaking, you can just pause and then you can just pick back up. We did get this question in the previous one, didn't get a chance to ask it, but it is an interesting notion and give you a chance to respond to this. We'll start with Nikki here. So this is what one audience member writes: should Kansas enact a law similar to those in effect in Nebraska and Maine, authorizing an electoral vote to be awarded to the winner of each congressional district? They're asking because, I guess, as they put it, why shouldn't Kansas's 3rd congressional district, which we're in, have a chance to have our voice heard? I think the implication being that with the way, as most states are, Kansas is winner take all of the electoral votes, but obviously the 3rd district is the one that in the recent elections has voted Democratic, while the other 3 have voted Republican. Is this something that would be worth pursuing? Is there any appetite for this? Is there any role that you could play in this if reelected, Nikki?
Well, I would be in favor of it, but with our current extremist Republican leadership, I can't ever see that they'd even humor us with a conversation. we're just gonna have to break the supermajority, and then we could be partners in governing. There is no compromise that happens, and it's very disheartening. The people of Johnson County, sorry, I just want to say, the people of Johnson County are very often not very well represented in that building.
Henry Johns, a question to you, District 5, this notion of doing something about apportioned congressional representation in electoral votes. Nikki already answered it, but I give you a chance to expound.
I think we should. I think that the system we have is a bit antiquated, and it doesn't represent the people as adequately as it could.
Another question from the audience. Do you favor any form of legalization of marijuana? So that will go to Henry first. Again, the announcement might come up. You can just pause if it comes up while you're speaking. This comes from the audience. Favor any form of marijuana legalization. I'll just note that Kansas, I believe, remains one of the... there we go.
The library will be closing in 5 minutes. Please take materials to a self-check for checkout. Computer and copier access will be terminated in 5 minutes. Thank you for visiting the Johnson County Library.
Kansas, I believe, remains one of the few states that currently does not allow either legal, recreational, or medicinal marijuana. So what's your stance on this, Henry Johns?
Kansas is behind the times. The Kansas legislature could have had a whole new revenue stream by taxing recreational marijuana. And they have been denying people who are in chronic pain, with chronic health conditions, or terminally ill people, or veterans who suffer from PTSD, the advantages of being able to use medical marijuana.
Nikki, the question to you, any form of legalization of marijuana that you would support? How would you go about wanting to see the state do it?
I really appreciate this question, and I did anticipate it tonight. I am really in support of studying this subject. My father passed away from esophageal cancer in Arkansas several years ago, and he benefited greatly from medical marijuana when he was in hospice. In fact, he found more relief from medical marijuana than even fentanyl or liquid morphine. I believe it has a medicinal value, but I do recognize that like any drug, there are interactions and side effects that need to be studied and considered. So I think in the end, recreational marijuana would be likely a bridge too far for me, but medical marijuana is something I would like to see more information on.
We'll each give you a chance to give a closing statement, give one final note to readers and viewers, both in the room and online. Again, we'll note that neither of your opponents are here tonight for various reasons, but I give you a chance to say one final thing to the voters. We'll start with Nikki McDonald in District 49.
Thank you. So I come from humble roots, and I know what it's like to do without, to stretch every dollar, and to struggle without a safety net to fall back on. With the rising costs of inflation, housing, healthcare, I get it. I'm committed to making sure that we all can access affordable quality health care, child care, that teachers can earn a decent living, and that college is affordable. With a record surplus in our budget, it was really important to me to lower taxes for working families and seniors. And I want to make corporations pay their fair share. In this race, I'm the one with the experience for pushing for changes in education policy and funding as a parent, a business owner, a community advocate, and a sitting member of the House Education K-12 Budget Committee. I am more reflective than my opponent of the district that we live in. I am the one that has a middle-class family, and I'm doing my best to help my children and my kids, to help my children and their friends have just such a bright future like we did, more potential than we had growing up. So, in short, I'm the candidate who's best equipped to represent our district in the State House.
We're looking for the closing statement. Again, that's District 49. Her opponent is Kurtis Ruf, who had a conflict tonight, according to him, so he was not able to be here tonight. We'll go now to District 5, and Henry Johns, give you a chance to give a closing statement.
Well, first I want to thank you and the Post for having us here this evening, and thank the library staff for not throwing us out early. We do appreciate that. In closing, gosh, what can I say? Nikki has said almost everything there is to say, and she's a hard act to follow. I'm not a politician, and I'm a believer. When I went through knocking doors, one of the questions I asked people was, when's the last time you heard or saw from your representative? And the answer was, never. And I asked, who is your representative? And they said, I don't know. And I told them, I want a chance to do that job, because if I get that job, you're going to be seeing me on a regular basis, because I want to hear from you. Because you cannot represent people if you're not willing to talk to them and listen to them. You can't just sit in Topeka and be a rubber stamp for whatever the party tells you. You need to go out and talk to people, find out what they need in their lives, and how you can help make things better for them.
That's Henry Johns, District 5, and again, just to remind, Carrie Barth is the current representative for District 5, not able to be here tonight, said she had a fundraising event in a different county. Of course, that district covers, I think, parts of 4 different counties. So, but give them a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much to Nikki, McDonald, and Henry Johns. And thank you for watching the Johnson County Post After Dark. We really appreciate it. Stay for the 3rd forum. Again, you can go to johnsoncountypost.com for all of our election coverage. We really do appreciate it. And have a good night.
The library is now closed. Thank you for visiting the Johnson County Library.
That was